Hello and welcome to Deep Thoughts, Shallow Plots. She's Erika, and she really likes horror movies.
And she's Katy, and she really likes to overanalyze things. Katy, what horror movie are we overanalyzing today?
Today, we are ending our summer series with I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Right, 1997.
Ooh.
Directed by Jim Gillespie, written by Kevin Williamson, who's also the writer of Scream and Scream 2, worth noting.
I think before we get too far into it, we just have a quick programming announcement.
Right, since it is the end of the summer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we are getting into the school year, which is when we are people who work during.
Yeah. Thanks for the reminder.
We are going to switch to releasing episodes just once a month instead of twice.
Yeah.
For the time being.
We got like a lot going on. I have to work, whatever.
I have to work too.
Yeah, Katie's got to work and write.
Yeah.
You've got a lot to
Yeah.
do, and on top of producing and editing this podcast.
Yeah.
So
Which we do not get paid for.
No.
But if anybody wants to pay us, we
Also-
will switch to twice a month again.
No, we're straight up losing money on this. Every time we spend $3.99 on Vudu to watch the movie that we're covering.
Yeah. Plus hosting the podcast.
Because this is a labor of love.
Yep.
Right. And we want to keep it that way.
Yes.
I don't want this to be another thing I hate doing.
Yes. We don't want it to get stressful.
Yeah.
So, paring back a little bit. But
Yeah, just a little. And then, you know what? Maybe next summer we'll ramp it back up. I don't know. We'll see. Who knows? Who knows? The world's our oyster.
Yeah.
But today we're going to talk about I Know What You Did Last Summer. Should we just jump into it?
yeah, let's see. A quick plot rundown is basically just that a bunch of teens accidentally hit a guy with their car and then go to dump his body in the lake or river,
it's the ocean.
Yeah. I don't
it's
know
the
bodies of
Atlantic
water.
Ocean. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
They're all fishers and stuff.
Yeah.
But the body was not actually dead and blah, blah, blah. And then they get notes like, I know what you did last summer. Oh, God. And then a hook-handed man comes to kill them. That's it. That's the plot.
Perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself. You forgot to, a hook-handed man shows up and hilarity ensues.
Right, yeah,
That's
and I think most importantly, Sarah Michelle Gellar ensues.
Star-studded cast, yes.
Yeah. Jennifer Love Hewitt
ensues, yes.
Freddie Prinze Jr.
And Ryan Phillippe.
Yeah.
It's I have complicated feelings about Ryan Phillippe, but actually, in my research for this, I found quite a few stories of Ryan Phillippe's performance in this film actually being part of a first sexual awakening for a lot of gay and bisexual men.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, I love that. Yeah. A great cast, really. Mm-hmm. And these four people give us pretty interesting characters, I think.
Yeah. I think they're deeper than we get in a lot of horror films.
Right. Yeah, which is nice because, I think we're going to talk at length about the slasherness of this film, but that's also something you can not get in a slasher film.
Often.
Right. I think Evil Dead.
Yeah.
There's no character development.
Yeah.
In that. There's no characters, but it's still a good movie and the franchise is good. Also, Evil Dead Rise is fantastic. They do actually give character development. I'm just talking about the first one. So we actually get pretty interesting, pretty well fleshed out characters for a 90s teen slasher, which is, nice. In the vein of Scream, which maybe has something to do with the fact that they were written by the same person.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And they also have that same sort of quippiness to the teens.
Right,
They have that cadence of this is how teens talk.
Oh boy, who do you want to talk about first?
Let's talk about Barry first.
Let's talk about
It's
Ryan
funny
Phillippe.
that you mentioned that gay men really had an awakening because the whole time I was watching it, I was thinking of, that Barbara Kruger piece that's you construct intricate rituals which allow you to touch the skin of other men.
I think only through you.
Okay,
yes,
yeah. It's a great piece. But I thought about it the whole time because literally every second he's like, let's see, can I get my hands on Max by pretending to fight him?
He wants his hands on everybody.
Yeah.
However, it is for violence.
It is for violence.
Is that part of the piece? Is violence part of
that? Yeah, because it's the construct intricate rituals.
Right, yeah.
So it's things like, you know, how guys will do sports.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's all that homosocial stuff of like, sports, violence, whatever you can do to touch the skin of other men because you can't do it in a loving way. So you're going to do it in this violent way.
Do it in a violent way.
Like he does it to
but he does it,
Ray too. Of like,
he does it to
who's
Ray,
like his friend.
And he does it to Max.
Yeah.
However, he does, and what is also good is that he does not do that to Helen, which is good because Helen's his girlfriend, but he does assault Julie. Did you notice that? Like,
I'm trying to remember.
He chokes her, or rather puts his hand on her throat.
Oh, what part?
So,
why don't I remember that?
Right when they're like, they've dumped the body in the Atlantic Ocean. And he's like, we're never talking about this again.
Yeah,
right, you know,
and she's the only one who's like still kind of
like, meh, and he's like, you have to say it, you know, and like kind of attacks her and like puts his hand on her throat. And she also, Julie, seems like nonplussed. Yeah. She's like bored by it. She's like, oh, this fucking guy.
He's always finding excuses to fight with people.
Yeah.
No, I think he's just very touch-starved. That's my interpretation of him.
Maybe. I mean, also, he's just incredibly materialistic. Like, his main concern for, you know, before the incident occurs, like, is his car.
Right.
He doesn't, like, want anybody else driving his car. You know, he's like, you know, he's
when
very
they
proud
think it's
of
just
his car.
an animal, he's more concerned about the damage to his car.
Yes, he's worried about the damage to his car. Right. He's also, what I like about Barry and Helen's relationship is that, like, they're both pretty materialistic. And, like, there is a part where, because the fishermen or whoever they put in the ocean, so who do they put in the ocean? Is it Ben Willis?
Yeah, it is Ben Willis.
So Ben Willis grabs her crown that she just won, and she's fucking obsessed with her crown, right?
Yeah.
And so Ryan Phillippe, fully clothed, he could have, like, he was wearing a sweater, he could have taken it off.
Yeah.
Barry jumps into the ocean to go get her crown back.
Well, my interpretation of that was that that's incriminating evidence.
Fair.
If they find that body with a crown in its hand, and it's clearly her crown from winning.
Do you think that Barry is thinking that far ahead about incriminating evidence?
I think Helen is.
Helen would be.
Actually, no, I do think Barry is. He's really concerned about how this is all going to look. He knows about appearances.
This is true, right? Yeah.
You know?
But, like,
and I don't think he's dumb. They are thinking steps ahead. They are thinking, whose life will this ruin? You know? And they're also, like, pointing out that it's going to ruin Ray's life, especially because he doesn't have the fancy lawyers. Well, like, they are thinking steps ahead.
Well, Ray points that out.
Yeah.
The other ones
but I just feel like they all are thinking
also,
about the consequences of this.
I feel like Barry is absolutely has the highest socioeconomic status.
He seems, he has a nice
he's supposed to be rich. And, like, Ray does mention that he's, like, the lowest, socioeconomically.
The fisherman class.
The fisherman class, right? Which is probably a majority. Yeah. Just saying. But, like, and then we kind of see how Julie and Helen live, you know? But, like, to me, it doesn't scream upper class. Like, it like, says comfortably middle class, but it doesn't say, like, very rich. It still would be,
I feel like especially with Helen, I'm thinking with Helen because her family is clearly, like, important business owners, that allows a certain amount, even if you don't have as much money as others, you have a certain influence in town.
Right, yeah. And it's an entire department store. Yeah. Yeah, so maybe they have that
and they do have a nice house. And we don't know as much about Jules.
They have an upstairs, which when I was a child, like, was the symbol to me of, like, of fanciness. If you had a refrigerator that could, like, you could get water from.
Oh, yeah, that was
like,
fancy.
Oh my gosh, this is so fancy. And now I have one and I love it. I was right the whole time. I was like, this is amazing. And if your house had a staircase in it, like there was more than one story to your house, like, you were fancy to me. Yeah. So, okay. So, Helen. And also, like, honestly, I feel since she's, like, a pageant queen, right? That hobby isn't really a cheap one.
No.
So, like, somebody has to be like vested and invested in that. So,
though it does seem like she's sort of like a local pageant queen. It doesn't seem like she's going off to other pageants. But
exactly.
Still.
Yeah. She's just doing a fun one. Like, graduated from high school a couple weeks ago, moving to New York in a month. And
I was going to say also the fact that her and Barry and sounds like Julie, they all have, like, lots of, like, pretty flashy prospects for their futures, which also implies a higher class.
Yeah.
You know?
That's true.
Just the fact that they're going to college in the 90s is like,
I want to mention that about Barry because, like, he's supposed to be on a football scholarship.
Yeah.
Barry does not play football. Like, I mean, we get to see Ryan Phillippe with, like, very few clothes on, right? And, like, he's very fit, right? You know, and that's great. But it's like, that's not a body that plays football. That's maybe plays basketball or baseball.
Soccer.
Maybe even soccer, but, like, that's not a body that plays football, dude.
He could be the kicker.
But maybe. And also...
Those are important.
I don't know how qualified either of us are, to talk about what a football body looks like, I guess. Yeah. But, like, I'm just not buying it that Barry plays football.
Well,
not
I think they'll
also... Except for the violence.
I was going to say, though...
Like, he's gotten a few concussions.
Our expectations for body types on screen have changed a lot since the 90s.
This is true, right? Yeah.
You wouldn't see that kind of build on TV, on movies and stuff in the 90s the way that you would do now.
Not in, like, a serious lead role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's still supposed to be a high schooler, so it's
even, like, a romantic interest.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Really good point, but I'm just not buying it. Sorry.
Going back to them having, like, deeper characters, I still feel like a lot of that character is kind of more hinted at than actually developed because, like, why does he have those dog tags?
Why does he have those dog tags?
We get kind of, like, a good view of them, and it's like...
I was under the impression that was kind of a fad in like, young men's fashion at the time. Okay. Like, it was a thing.
It's just like a fashion thing?
Tags. Okay. In my head... His dad's a vet.
Yeah, I was going to be like, maybe as a family member who was like killed in action.
Nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah, other than he has dog tags.
Yeah.
Or maybe his grandpa, even. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. But I feel like that's kind of typical of a lot of the characters where we have a little bit of set dressing that makes them feel a little bit deeper than you would get in a normal horror film.
Yeah.
But then you're still kind of like, but wait, what?
All I really else have to say about Barry right now is, like, his obvious anger issues.
Yeah.
you know? And, you know, like, any excuse to touch... men, but anybody.
Yeah.
But he also, like, you know, he's very quick to, like, physically, you know, get close to people physically, like, as a way of being aggressive that way, you know?
Yeah.
But he also just, like, yells immediately, you know? Like, he's, like, super quick to just be like, fuck you! I'm gonna kill you! And it's just like, whoa.
Whoa, bring it back.
Yeah, it's like, you're at a 10, everybody else is at a 3.
Yeah.
Like, we need to match this energy, you know? So it's not just the physicality of the violence. Like, there's other violence, you know?
I think giving him depth and backstory that isn't actually there, he does have a little bit of that trope of, like, the poor little rich boy where there's something about him that feels very, like, isolated. You know, like, when we do see him at his house, it's like this huge house and he is there alone, you know?
His mom is weirdly in the background for, like, a hot second.
Yeah, but it seems very isolated. Like, that's not a relationship that
As I was watching this movie, it was like, oh, this is another There Are No Adults movie.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Like Sleepaway Camp. There's a lot of movies.
Classic of slashers.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, I don't know. I feel like they kind of are going for that vibe of the poor little rich boy who's like, he's got all this wealth, but he doesn't have love.
Right. And I think that that's something that happens to all of them by the time, like, the incident occurs and they come back out a year later.
Yeah, they all seem very isolated.
They're all, really lonely and really isolated. Yeah. And I guess maybe Barry just, like, got a head start.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think on that subject, if we're ready to move on to Ray, I do think he's interesting in that sense because he's the one who starts a relationship with the sister of the guy that they think they killed.
But, like, it's hard because, like, all that we get, the only dialogue we get is we were sweet on each other for a little.
Yeah. And then
it had to stop. And
because
it was like,
he got
sweet on each other? Like, did you flirt? Did you, like, were you guys just, like...
I don't... Yeah.
Did she just, like, feel those butterflies when she was around him? And, like...
I mean, it was extensive enough that she knew that he had to end things because, like, he just would get sad when he looked at her.
Oh, okay.
You know? So, like, there was enough of a relationship for that to happen, for them to talk about David to some extent, because she was under the impression that they were, like, friends or something. So, like, they definitely at least had some sort of relationship, even if it wasn't...
Well, I mean, you know...
physically consummated or something.
He and Julie broke up, so, like...
Yeah.
He's single.
I just think that's such an interesting way to handle the situation.
It's again...
It seems sort of masochistic.
Yeah, it's like... Is that maybe, like, some way Ray is, like, trying to punish himself?
Right.
Like, the way that so much of this movie is about, like, punishment.
Yeah.
That, like, he's just, like, doing it to himself.
He's
like,
don't worry,
fisherman, I got it. Like, you don't need
I'm going to hurt myself by enmeshing myself in the family of the person that I killed. You know, especially since he was the one who was driving.
However, Barry was offering many distractions.
Barry, it was kind of his fault.
I think, so Ray, like, I feel like the main thing for him is, like, he's not as rich as everybody else, you know?
Yeah, what's the thing Barry accuses him of when they start fighting? Because he's, like, accusing him of being the murderer, and he's like, you're always dogging us, always wanting to be our friend, but you were too jealous to handle it.
Something like that.
Yeah. He says that he was too jealous, and obviously it's, like, a class thing and a wealth thing, because he's the one who's not popular.
But on a rewatch, Ray mentions wanting, like, to go to New York as well.
Oh, does he?
Yeah. And
to do what?
He never says.
That's what I mean about almost having character depth, but not quite.
But he says it to Julie.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know if they exactly say, but they do kind of give the information, because he says it to Julie when they're on the beach at the very beginning before the accident, where they have sex, by the way. Like, they're supposed to have sex, which is...
both couples are having sex.
Yeah, they are. But actually, it does seem like Julie and Ray are, like, not as sexually active. Like, they're, like, that was maybe, like, one of their first times.
Oh, did you get that vibe?
I did. Because Ray's like, are you sure? Or, like, are you... Yeah, says something like that.
I thought that was maybe just because they were on a fucking beach.
I know, right? Sex.
My God.
Like the sand, though. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, they don't have blankets. They don't have... Just like...
They were just telling a scary story about people getting killed for necking.
I know. So that sets up the fact that there's no virgin in this movie, which is... probably going to be important later. I don't know. So none of them are virgins. But... Yeah, he says to her, I don't know, maybe go to New York or something, and because he doesn't want their relationship to end. So he's just like, don't go to Boston, even though, like, she seems very, Julie's, like, seems very smart, academically inclined,
excited, she's got shit to do.
Very excited about this new part of her life, which she absolutely should go do, you know?
Yeah.
And then she was like, you know... You can go to New York. He mentioned something about New York. And she's like, oh, you'll go to New York and you'll fall in love with some, like, shaved head, pierced nose philosophy student. Yeah. Something like that. And he's basically like, no, I won't, you know.
He has that thing about, he's like, high school sweethearts tend to, you know, statistically are likely to end up together. And she's like, cite your sources?
She does, yes. I'm
like, girl, I love you. Yeah. Yes. Make that man cite his sources, because that is not the truth.
That is not true. Yeah, so it's just like, why didn't he go to New York? Like, why didn't he and Helen go? Well, like, who cares? Like, I mean, Helen
does end up going to New York for a little bit.
What if they went together, though?
Well, like, but I don't think they wanted to see each other anymore.
They wanted to be different people now.
I'm not clear if they're actually friends. I mean, I know that they are by...
It definitely feels like the friendship here is Julie and Helen.
Yeah.
And then their boyfriends are just kind of satellites. Yeah. And, like, the four of them are, like, a social circle. But without the Helen-Julie relationship, like, it all
I don't think it would. Yeah.
Which is actually what happens.
It is, yeah.
Helen and Julie, like, stop talking to each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when they come back, they're the first to reinitiate conversation with each other. They're the first to talk to each other again.
Yeah, Julie does go try to find...
And Helen actually looks kind of happy to see Julie for a moment before she sort of remembers the horrors. The horrors. And then, like, but, like, when it comes to seeing the guys, they're like, nah, I don't want anything to do with you. It, like, hurts me to be around you. Which is interesting. That they're, like, they have an easier time with each other. Yeah. Because, I think they had a deeper friendship. Yeah. Probably even deeper than they had with romantic relationships with their boyfriends.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's a high school relationship, of course.
Yeah.
That's, absolutely.
Whereas high school friendships will fuck you up for life. And actually, on that subject of their friendship, I just need to point out the very small gay things.
Oh, okay. Hey, so just so you know, there is in the sequel, not that you need to, like, rush to see it, but there is some lesbian subtext between Brandy and...
Brandy.
And...
Jennifer Love Hewitt.
Thank you.
Nice.
That's great. Anyway,
well, I think Julie and Helen have some. Like, the first thing that we get is Helen, you know, doing her beauty queen thing, and Julie is just like beaming, like, oh, she was made for this. Just like, like, she's clearly the center one with the two guys next to her. Oh, where it's like she is there for her girl, and they're also there.
Yeah.
And like maybe she also like gave her some of the lines to say. For the beauty pageant thing.
Right, yeah.
So it's like a very Beauty and the Brains thing. Yeah. You know? But no, my main thing actually is that Helen has this line where she's like, what happened to us? We used to be friends. Yeah. And Julie says, we used to be a lot of things.
Oh!
And I know she didn't mean it in a gay way. She doesn't mean
that, yeah. But then, I want it. What does Helen say right after that?
Oh, I don't know.
She just says, like, I miss you.
Oh.
Yeah. And then what does Julie say? Nothing. Nothing. The scene ends, like Julie says nothing and the scene ends. I'm like, Rude.
High school girl friendships,
Yeah.
man.
Actually, Helen, funny that you mentioned that, because Helen says quite a few interesting things. When Julie and Helen, like, go visit Missy, I think the first time, and they're, like, debriefing in the car together, and Julie, I don't remember exactly what Julie says, but Helen says, I don't think we're that powerful.
Oh.
Which was just a really interesting line, like, because I think what Julie was talking about was just, like, our actions have created this spiral that have impacted many lives.
Oh, yes.
Right, and,
Where
like...
it's like, this family has been ruined because of us.
Because of what we did. Yeah. And Helen's like, I don't think we're that powerful. And I was like, huh.
She's kind of right. And also, like, yeah, you're just some 18-year-old lady.
They all literally just graduated from high school.
Yeah.
Okay?
You aren't that powerful in any way.
But they also, like, they are. Like, their actions did do that.
To an extent.
To an extent, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Though actually not really,
because... There was already, like, some trauma.
Right. There was already the trauma
before.
there. And David Egan was already killed at the point. Because Ben Willis kills David Egan before these teens even get involved. So that family was going to be destroyed no matter what.
That's true. And then also, like, what does it... Well, because at that point, they didn't know that they didn't kill Egan. They thought... they thought that's who they killed.
Yeah.
So I could see that...
Which is a pretty good twist.
Yeah, it was a good twist. I was thinking about your Lit Corner on twist endings.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah.
I was like oh, red herring.
Oh, this movie has many red herrings.
Yeah.
Yes. So I just thought that was, like, a really interesting line written for, like, an 18-year-old girl.
I think I think when it comes to characters having depth, she kind of actually stands out to me more than the other characters. And perhaps part of that is just because I think Sarah Michelle Gellar is a really good actor.
Yeah, and she's also doing the best job in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong, Freddie Prinze Jr. and Ryan Phillippe, they're great, but, like, they're not giving it in this movie.
Sarah Michelle Gellar gives.
Especially Freddie Prinze Jr. Because it's, like, his first movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, Sarah, she always gives.
Yeah.
I mean, I keep the scene that really stays with me is the one where she's just, like, sad alone in her house drinking, like, a Depression Diet Coke.
Yes.
Just being...
Oh my God.
Oh, wait, and she's not even alone, actually. I think her dad's there.
Her dad's there, who's, like, sitting, watching sports and, like, drinking what we're probably supposed to believe is scotch or something.
Yeah.
And, like, she says, hi, Daddy. And he doesn't say, and he doesn't even look at her.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
There's so much in that.
And Mom's nowhere.
Yeah. And then her sister, they have a really antagonistic relationship.
What is up with her sister?
Elsa, I think.
Elsa, yeah. Like, what? But it seems so, like, one-sided. Like, Elsa is picking on Helen. Yes. And anything Helen does is just, like, to retaliate against what's already happening.
I know. People's responses to Helen are so weird. I was thinking about that also in terms of, like, when she starts freaking out because there's been a fucking murder and she saw a murder and they're all immediately like, she's hysterical, she's crazy. And it's like, based on what? Why would you assume that why would you not assume she's telling the truth? Has she lied a lot in the past? Like, why is she immediately assumed to be hysterical? Is it just because she's a teen girl?
I think, it's just because she's a teen girl, yeah.
Because, like, what the fuck?
Like, she is freaking the fuck out,
Which, like, you would if you saw somebody getting murdered.
Exactly. Oh, I also noticed, again, on the second watch, that when Helen is, like, being escorted away, she's freaked out, and they're like, okay, let's get you out of here, and that cop's gonna take her home,
Yeah.
And before she leaves, they take her crown back. Right? Mm-hmm. Right? And so, like, the crown storyline is, like, really interesting because, like, she gets it right at the beginning of the movie. She has it on, like, during this accident. And, like,
she's, like, not taking it off.
She will not take it off.
It's so dumb.
She loses it and, like, gets it back,
Yeah.
And then, like...
She gets taunted with it.
Right. And it's, like, it gets taken away and then, like, 10 minutes later she dies.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow.
That was all she was.
That was just like, that was like the last thing. Like, she's finally lost everything now.
Yeah.
And, I mean, she did fight, but like, she ends up dying, so.
Yeah, that is interesting.
I feel like she's also somebody, especially after the incident, like, she really shows, like, how sad everybody got,
Yeah.
Like, I also am a little bit, like, also not buying the New York thing because she wasn't even there for a year. So, like, how long was she there when she's like, it wasn't working out? And I was like, girl, you weren't.
She didn't try.
You didn't try.
Yeah.
Like,
she only went probably because she already had it planned, so she just was going along with it. But, like.
And then she didn't, that wasn't something she wanted to pursue anymore after, maybe after the accident.
Yeah.
And then just needed, being an 18, 19-year-old, just, like, needed to figure out what she wants to do.
Yeah.
Which is fair.
And I think what she wants to do after all of that was just sort of, like, to not exist in a sort of way of just, like, I'm just going to have this dumb job at my parents' department store. I'm not going to be, like, a beauty queen anymore. Like, I'm just going to fade. And it's, like, such a difference to her. I don't know. Even when they're in that stressful situation, she's the only one who's like, well, I'm going to put the body in the water if nobody else is going to fucking... Like, she's so... True. She has so much initiative.
Yeah, she does.
She has such big plans. She has so much, like, take charge attitude. Yeah. And then, like, afterwards, it is not there anymore. Yeah.
Which may be why she doesn't get to be the final girl. Julie does. Well, it's weird, right? Because, like, usually final girls do have, like, that initiative,
Yeah. Well, and she does later, Julie. I think after the
That's true. And honestly...
She's the most gung-ho about solving this mystery.
It happens more in the sequel. Like, I think Julie really comes into her final girlness in the sequel.
But I think Julie has to be the final girl in this one because she's the only one who, like, we can really say, other than going along with the other kids, didn't do anything. Because Helen's the one who pushed him in the water, which is actually what they think killed him.
Right, yeah.
Ray hit him with the car.
Yes.
Barry was the one being a big old distraction.
Right.
Julie has to be our final girl because she's the only one who didn't, like, very actively play a role.
I think that as well. Yeah, that she was, like, the most innocent.
Yeah. And she just also seems to be the one who actually feels bad about what they did. The other ones are kind of a little bit in denial about it, or they express it in other ways. She's the only one who can be open about the fact that she thinks what they did was wrong.
Yeah.
And, like, knows that they found the body and, like, who the body was,
She's definitely the most passionate about it. Like, she's the one who, like, just, like, stands up, looks up at the sky and screams, "What are you waiting for?" Nobody else has a reaction like that. Julie is also the one who, it's the most obvious, is not doing well. A year later.
I feel like she's the one who, like, I mean, sure, there's, like, the football scholarship and, like, the plans for New York, but, like, it does feel like Julie, though, is the one who's, like, really actually has the most potential to, like, go places.
She does. Like, she's very academically inclined, and, like, they make a mention of, like, her kind of being on the cusp of academic probation at the end of her first year, right?
Yeah, so, her mom fully thinks she's on drugs because her behavior is so bizarre.
She looks awful.
She looks awful.
She's
not calling home.
No, she's
Call
not
your
visiting.
mother.
She's not visiting. And I know that this was because of her... because of the incident and, like, the big trauma that happened. But there was a part of my brain that was like, maybe it's just because, like, she's a tag kid who's, like, maybe actually being academically challenged.
Sometimes this happens when kids go to college. Yeah.
Yes.
They were great all the time, and then...
And she can't hang. Like, it's too much for her. It's too much pressure,
College gets really stressful.
Yeah, she's, like, actually being challenged for maybe the first time, and she doesn't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's the trauma of the accident, but I did have that thought.
At the end of the movie, somehow all of that trauma is resolved, and she's great
she
again.
makes the dean's list. Yes, they like,
and she's calling home.
They show how she's doing emotionally, like, through her academic abilities.
Because that's really what she is just her grades.
Yeah,
in the same way that Helen is just her crown.
Right.
Yeah, which is interesting with her also being the sort of, like, moral center, I guess, as much as any of them are, where she's the one who's like, this is wrong. What we're doing is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. But then later, when they're, trying to find the killer, she has this line that's like, I'm not interested in what's right anymore. I want what's smart. And that really being, like, kind of a tension in her character.
That's interesting. I didn't catch that.
At the end, what do you think about Ray and Julie rekindling their romance?
Ugh, hate it.
It ranked so false to me.
Yeah.
Especially when he's like, I love you, Julie. And she's like, I understand your pain.
Right. Well, because she said that at the beginning. It's a callback, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's stupid because at the end of the day, this is a high school relationship. And, like, no, they should break up. Yeah. And unfortunately, that continues through the sequel.
Right.
They both survived the sequel. Spoiler, they both survived the sequel.
But it does feel like, at this point in their relationship, honeys, you're just, like, trauma bonded.
Exactly, yeah.
You just went through something that nobody else can understand.
And then...
So you're stuck with each other. But that's not love.
But, yeah. It's
Or it's a type of love, but it's not necessarily a healthy relationship.
And then in the sequel... They show a shot of Freddie Prinze Jr. like showing like an engagement ring like to his friend, like, and I was like, don't do this. Oh my god, they just like insist on it.
How much time has passed before the sequel? How old are they? Only a year. So they're like 19, 20 maybe.
A year.
Gonna get engaged.
Yeah.
Oh, motherfuckers.
I know. I hate it.
I guess he was right about that statistic.
No, he wasn't though. But what I really like I feel like the purpose of that, like, there is a purpose to that, and I know that we're going to talk about urban legends pretty soon, but, like, I feel like the purpose is, like, look, they're, like, doing the right thing according to the urban legend that this is based off, right? Like, committed heterosexuality, you know? Like, that's what you're supposed to do.
There's,
like, okay, whatever.
She's the good girl. He's the good good boy.
Good boy, yeah. Well, yeah, whatever. Okay, so now I just have, like, in my notes, I have just, like, the death order.
Yeah, because I do feel like a character that we haven't talked about that is kind of interesting in terms of death order.
Yeah.
Related to that is Max.
That's right. Yeah, Max is crazy.
He's the first victim of the slasher killer.
Yeah.
And, like, why?
I think, honestly, because he's set up as a red herring at the beginning, because he, like, kind of witnesses part of the incident, right? So he's kind of set up as a red herring. It's set up as he's, like, into Julie.
Yeah.
And, like, doesn't like Ray or Barry, like, doesn't like them. Also kind of seems like a bully, which is weird. Like,
because he seems somehow less in terms of, like, the social hierarchy than
exactly
them.
Yeah, it's like, if you want to bully, like, Johnny Galecki's not your guy. Like, Johnny Galecki can be your guy for a lot of things, but not
it felt very much like they were the bullies of him, you know?
Yeah.
Even though that wasn't, like, if you just listen to the dialogue, that wasn't happening. But just, like, the visuals, it was like, so it's just, like, he didn't start the fights ever, you know?
No.
Like, he was just trying to talk to Julie, which I
did.
understand can be very annoying when you're a lady who's not interested in a man and is doing a lot of soft nose that he should be picking up on, and he is not picking up on them.
What does he say? Like, oh, you can't just leave without saying goodbye. I'm like, yes, she can.
She can.
Yes,
she owes you nothing.
Yeah. Sorry, man. I know.
Sorry.
It sucks.
It sucks.
And then it made me think about, again, because it's so important to remember that this movie, like, or this incident is taking place in the summer that these people have graduated from high school.
Yeah.
So, like, okay, so the summer between end of high school, beginning of college, are you kidding me? And I was thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, there are definitely people that I saw with great frequency in high school, like, daily, I have not seen since high school.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
That was the intention, in fact.
That's the point. Yeah. And it's just like,
and
then,
you
might not see each other again. Who cares? It's fine.
And then there's always the people who, like, you wanted to keep in touch with, but it just didn't happen. Or people who wanted to keep in touch with you, and you were like, nah, sorry, high school's over. And so, like, they were just kind of in that spot, and, like, they were on different pages.
Yeah. So, yeah, just, like,
but,
in their development, they're in, like, such a precious spot.
Yeah.
While all this is happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think Max gets killed, honestly, because in my personal opinion, the death count's too low anyway. So, like, they need to kill somebody. And, like, he's a red herring, but Ray is also a red herring. And then there's, like...
But, like, yeah, okay,
you know.
So from, like, a meta sense, I get it. But, like, if I am the killer...
Right.
Why am I targeting that guy? I don't know if that guy from... just because he was there and maybe could have seen something, but didn't. Like, maybe because...
Yeah.
He had the moment of being like, my savior.
Because he also...
Max. And Max didn't save him.
He also kills Elsa, Helen's sister. What does she do? Like, honestly, I think she was just there and in the way.
Which kind of makes sense, because it's kind of the same with the cop, who's also just kind of there in the way.
So maybe in some way Max was in the way?
Maybe.
I don't know.
I just found that one really unclear.
Yeah.
And, like, it was just sort of like, well, we need a good first kill.
Yeah, right. It's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
Could use more blood, but that's fine.
Yeah.
And then Barry gets attacked. And, like, it seems like he's done for. Like, he's getting chased down by the car.
Yeah.
He's, like, on his back. The killer's right on top of him.
Yeah.
And then he blacks out and we're in the hospital. Yeah. And I was like, wait, what happened? I didn't catch it. What happened?
See, that is one of those things that I feel like makes this very much a YA thriller and not a slasher.
Oh, okay.
And I will dive in deeper into that in a little bit. But yes, that is one to keep in mind. And I feel like, though, on the other hand, we have Max dying, which is very much a slasher thing.
Right, yeah.
And what keeps this from
and
being
also
a YA
Ilsa,
thriller.
Too.
Yeah, where it is just sort of like, we just need that high body count.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter why we're killing them. Just got to keep them dead.
Right, yeah. So that happens to Barry. And then he gets attacked again, right? And the same thing when Helen gets attacked and eventually killed. Like, we don't see Barry or Helen die.
I didn't think about that.
A horror fan, that upsets me because, like, I want to see him, you know, like, I want to see
That's why we're watching
the blood
this.
and
That
guts.
is what slashers are for.
And also, it's, now, like, through the 21st century Marvel universe kind of lens, it's like, if you didn't see it, it didn't happen.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so just like, we have to see it, so we have to know what happened, because like, I don't want to see Sarah Michelle Gellar like walk around a corner and be like, I didn't die, you know.
Right.
But then they find them in the ice and they're totally dead.
They're
but
totally
it's like,
dead. But I guess maybe that's
part
of it was having the suspense of like, maybe they can still be saved, since, you know,
he
wasn't killed that first time, so maybe he wasn't killed the second time either.
Maybe there's hope,
like keeping that sort of suspense. Yeah.
And then the police officer dies.
Yeah.
Also Helen. And then Helen's the last one to die.
Yeah.
That's it. And actually, I did hear that the director was actually was purposefully trying to make a quote bloodless slasher. To which I say, boo.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
But I imagine, it was intended for a younger audience in a way.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, you know, a younger audience would probably still show up for the blood and guts, but whatever.
One that their parents could feel better about.
I guess, yeah. Also, to the point of it being more of a slasher YA.
Yeah, it has this kind of crossover
hybrid.
thing.
Yeah. Which, did you know that there was some adaptation of this that got like one season on Amazon Prime?
Yes, I did not watch it, but
Neither
yes,
did
I saw that when I was looking at it.
Yeah.
I was like, I wonder if that actually stuck to the book plot instead.
Right, because, this is based off a book, and the book is very different.
Very different.
Yeah.
There's no hook-handed man.
What? Ugh. Okay, well, I really like the hook-handed man. Actually, and that's a really great segue into Slasher Corner, if you're ready.
Yeah, let's talk about this being a slasher to some extent and not to other extents.
Yeah, right. So there's another character that we haven't really talked about too much, and that is Ben Willis, who is the name of the
hook-handed man.
Yeah.
Actually, he's not even a hook-handed man.
He's called the Fisherman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't actually have a hook for a hand. He just has a hook as a weapon.
That's his weapon, right? Yes, exactly. Because he has the hand. Right?
Yeah. He was not castrated.
Right. So, but he was.
He was.
At the end. We've talked about final girls a lot.
Yeah.
You know, or final boys, as the case may be, right? And that's great. Love a final girl. That's okay. But I feel like what this movie was giving me, and like what this was making me think of for Slasher Corner, right, is that it's important to remember that the final girl exists mostly within the context of the adversarial relationship with the psycho killer, right? They're like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
You know, you really can't have one without the other. So our final girl is Julie.
Yeah.
And she's an interesting version of the final girl. She's not a virgin. She has sex at least once. We know this, right? And she is more like passive, at least in the beginning. And like, does she ever, except at the very end, does she ever like fight the fisherman head on?
No, I mean, her way of fighting it is a little bit more like coming up with plans.
Right, and she does end up facing the fisherman head on, but like when she does, it's with the assistance of Ray. Ray's there
it
too.
almost feels like the final girl is sort of split between the two, and the masculine aspects of the final girl can be expressed through Ray.
Yeah. Oh, maybe. Yeah.
Because they're really both the final.
They really are. They're both the final girl. Yeah.
Thems.
The final theys. Yeah. Who also survives. So Julie, again, yeah, exactly. Julie isn't even really the final girl.
Yeah.
Like in so many ways, she's not in like the traditional
right.
cookie cutter sense, you know?
Yeah.
So even though Julie isn't really a very like typical cut and dry final girl, which, you know, is part of this movie being like a slasher, kinda, you know? Ben Willis, the fisherman,
yes,
is an amazing psycho killer,
yes.
which is one aspect of a slasher that like it needs to have, right?
Yeah.
He's an amazing psycho killer.
Yeah.
Maybe even like quintessential, you know? And I feel like, of the slasherness of this film, the fisherman does a lot of the heavy lifting, right?
Yes.
And also seems maybe even more concerned with the psychological torture for punishment.
I have thoughts on that, but
rather
I'll get
than
to those.
The physical torture, like murder. So if you want to create an effective psycho killer, anybody writing a slasher, there has to be a motivation, like a revenge-driven backstory.
It always is revenge, huh?
It's usually revenge. Like Freddy is like stalking the kids of the people who killed him. Jason hates co-ed campers because they're like the ones who let him drown.
Yeah.
Also killed his mom, right?
Yeah.
Like the psycho killer is in charge of carrying out the punishments for the transgressions of the young people, right? And he's so good at that. Like it's perfect, right? Like he absolutely has the motivation. He's like actually
they basically killed him.
He's a victim of them, right? And he's like coming back around to get them, and it's like, that's great. A really great way to like do the motivation, right?
Yeah.
And also the psycho killer should still be like slightly removed relationally from the main group of youths, right? Again, Freddy is like out for these kids because what their parents did, not like what they did, you know? It is kind of like 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
Like his daughter was dating the guy,
and then
they thought they killed.
Yes, and he was killing that guy because he killed his daughter.
It was an accident, but
and then he
still.
accidentally got hit by them, and it triggered him.
So they are connected, but like.
But there was so much more going on.
There's more going on. Yeah, that's good.
That like if they had accidentally hit anybody else,
this wouldn't have happened, probably.
Yeah, that other person would not have responded in this way.
Right, yeah. Also, another thing that you gotta have for an effective...
Wait, before you move on.
Yeah.
Is there a reason, though, for having that distance, do you think? Between the psycho killer and his victims? Having those sort of degrees of separation?
Right, well, and, you know, it's not always that way. I think about Scream.
Right, yeah,
it's
very
Billy and
close.
Stu, they're, like, in it,
Right,
you know?
yeah. But I'm just wondering about what that does. Is it just to sort of keep that sort of like stranger danger outsider aspect?
Maybe, yeah, obviously.
Especially with like a hook-handed man.
Exactly, like how much this movie has to do and say about urban legends.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, yeah, maybe it is
The
like...
idea of like an escaped convict.
And also, you know, if we're actually going to be like sensible and realistic about it, not moral panicky about it, like the people who are most likely to hurt you are the people you know, right? Usually more intimately than the guy you thought you killed's girlfriend's dad. But whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, it is interesting. But probably not my favorite or the ones that I find the most interesting here. Honestly, I think my favorite is this next one I was going for, is like the use of a mask or some other facial deformity like or disfigurement.
The costume, the aesthetic, sticking to a theme.
However, still human.
Yes.
Right? So like Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Freddy and Jason, Leatherface. Jigsaw wears a hood a lot. He doesn't like have any like facial disfigurement.
What's that weird face thing, or is that some sort of puppet?
That's like the puppet doll thing.
But he like uses it kind of as a mask in a way.
Yeah, he actually, because he does sometimes put like, because it's all about his recordings. And also, I would maybe push against Saw being a slasher franchise.
Well, yeah.
But that's like a discussion for another time. But Jigsaw is included in a lot of like infamous slashers, and I think it's appropriate. That's true.
I mean, part of it is to conceal. I imagine another part is intimidation.
Yes, and I also wonder if part of it is honestly some ableism.
Well, yes.
Because
absolutely.
Jason is like, we're meant to understand just from the first movie that he had like some developmental delays.
Right.
And that that's had some disfigurement.
Especially why he shouldn't have been left alone was like the idea, right?
Right, yeah.
Freddy, of course, with his like burn scars.
Oh, he's like crazy burned, yeah.
Yeah, which is supposed to make him look scarier because, oh God.
Yeah.
People with disfigurements.
Right. And like Michael Myers is just like a mask, you know, like it wasn't even called Michael Myers originally. He was just the shape, you know, like he's just like a generic man shape.
What could be scarier?
What could
honestly?
Be? Nothing sounds more terrifying.
Yeah.
So
the man shape.
You got to get the mask in there. So I'm loving the fisherman vibe.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Like,
and that is not technically concealing the face, but you can't see the face.
But you can't see it. Like everything's like the silhouette it makes. Is a good.
And how it like makes it easy for him to blend in because there are other just fishermen around apparently.
Yeah. And I have a lot more to say about that, but not right now. Okay. And then your psycho killer should also have some supernatural element. Like maybe they just seem like crazy strong or really fast or just like really hard to take down.
I remember us talking about that with Scream, about like that was part of the trick of having it be two people because it'd be so common for like, how did that psycho killer get from there to there?
Yes.
They're just so fast. But in this case,
like,
it was like
just two people.
There was two people.
Yeah, exactly. So like, and some slashers, psycho killers are literally supernatural. Freddy is like a ghost, whatever.
Yeah, whatever the fuck's
Jason
going on
is
there.
too. He's supposed to be dead.
Right, yeah. But he's not.
I don't know. I don't know. Michael is interesting. I did look this up. This is canon, even though I haven't seen every single Halloween movie. It is canon that Michael is like cursed.
Oh!
Yeah, he's straight up cursed. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And
that's fascinating.
Yeah. And then there's, probably some more depth and nuance to that curse, but he's basically cursed, right?
Right. And it's just also just sort of generally the thing of them not staying dead.
Exactly. And
that
also,
they all seem to share.
What always got me about Michael, at least from like the first Halloween movie, which I have seen, he never runs.
Right.
He gets up slowly and he walks and yet somehow ends up catching his victims who are running.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway, so there's the supernatural element either like indirectly or directly, right? And this psycho killer, can I tell you all of the absolutely supernatural things the psycho killer does?
Yeah.
What's
supposedly
your
realistic
favorite?
one?
What's your favorite?
Well, I mean,
absolutely ridiculous thing this killer does.
He's hit by a car and then dumped into the ocean, and he is fine.
He's fine. That's actually on my list. He gets hit by a car and thrown in water and survives. Okay, I'm going to take that one off.
Check one. But no, the other things that I find supernatural about him,
right,
are sort of going to go into why I think of this more as a YA thriller than as a slasher. Mm-hmm. Because I think there's something that YA thrillers do more than slashers, which is that rather than having that like supernatural strength or like that physical supernaturalness, the villains in YA thrillers tend to have more of like a supernatural smartness, intellect, a supernatural intellect, where it's like they're planning things out in like a way, they're like so many steps ahead. And, like, they know things that they shouldn't, maybe because they're doing some sort of surveillance. But it's like, when did they have time to do all of that fucking surveillance?
Right, yeah.
And, like, they have all these, like, really elaborate ways to, like, taunt people that are like, when do you have the time? How are you doing this in broad daylight?
Exactly.
You know? It's just like, I mean, there's this joke from, like, I'm going to talk about Pretty Little Liars later. But the original A, you know, the big bad guy.
Yeah.
A, Mona, she's the first one. She's talked about as having a personality disorder that causes her to live in a perpetual state of hyperreality. The adrenaline rush that accompanied her feelings of empowerment and her high level of intelligence fueled Mona's ability to be seemingly all-knowing and omnipresent.
So
and I
she's
feel
like manic.
Basically.
Okay.
But it allowed her to be super extra smart somehow.
Okay.
Which is like also kind of a weird ableism thing.
Yeah.
But like I feel like that's more what the supernaturalness of this guy fits a little bit in that vein.
Oh yeah, so that's what I've got. So this is the most ridiculous. Puts a fully frozen dead body with crabs.
With the crabs
in the trunk of Julie's car, which is enough. But no, there's more.
And then
he takes it all out.
In like the space of how long? Moments.
Well, it's actually, we don't know how long because, like, she goes to find, like, Julie goes to find Helen and Ray or whatever. And then, like, they're coming back and, like, we're not sure if
like
they're,
how far she had to go to get them.
Yeah. But it doesn't matter because it's in the middle of the day in a suburban street. Yes! And
was he wearing his fisherman gear when he did that?
I don't know.
Was he like, don't mind me and my fish?
Yeah, and like, but like, also the fact is that fully frozen dead body with the crabs is going to leave.
Yeah,
it's going to get like wet, and like the trunk looks like everything.
There would be some sign, yeah.
Which does play into something that does go through this movie and the sequel, which is like, what if Julie's just crazy?
Ooh,
right. But also,
and you know, those things can coexist where she could be getting targeted by the slasher killer, and also the trauma of that
making her go crazy.
Right. And it makes sense that she would imagine a body that was like drowned, you know, like with the crabs over it implies like a drowning or something, when that is something that she feels guilty about.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. And also the fact that, like, again, I think also that's something fishermen do. They crab, right? Yeah. And I think there's something about fishermen, like there's something socioeconomic going on here, I think, with the fishermen. So also the psycho killer sneaks into Helen's house. He's literally right next to her. She doesn't notice. Mm-hmm. He sneaks up and hides in her closet. Yeah. And, like, just to cut her hair and write, like, a message on the mirror and just, like, away into the night.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Classic YA thriller.
He kills Barry and takes his body away, leaving almost no physical evidence. Except, like, the
single drop of blood.
No, there's a little bit of blood, but, like... Still,
but it's like just the tiniest little dribblings.
Yeah, it's like, wow, that is very impressive.
Like, very quickly.
Yes,
in the time it took them to go upstairs.
Yes, he's gone. He survives, like a little spoiler for the sequel, he survives being thrown into the water at the end.
A second time.
Again, like he did in the beginning. Yeah, because he seems defeated, so that he can come back in the sequel. He's not defeated,
Classic.
And also, in the very last scene of both of these movies, this one and the sequel, the very last scene is Julie being attacked by the fisherman, right? Like, it's the very last scene, right? To really show that, like, the psycho killer and the final girl's fates are, like, really intertwined, right? So I love this. Also, one other thing you really should go for, like, a really good psycho killer, you want a good weapon, right?
Yeah.
Something unique to the psycho killer and preferably scary, right? Like, Freddy's razor fingers are terrifying, right?
Yeah.
Jason has a fucking machete. Like, it's like iconic, right?
Right, yeah.
And so, like, the fishhook is a great weapon, right?
It's thematic. It calls back to the urban legend.
Absolutely. And it also just, like, if we're looking at the fisherman silhouette, like, we think about slasher psycho killer silhouettes, right? If we're looking at the fisherman and, like, the detail of, like, a hook at the hand, like, kind of big, because, like, you got the slicker and the big hat, like, it's kind of all-encompassing, and then, like, the sleek hook. It's fantastic, right? So I just really like this psycho killer.
One other aspect, actually, I don't know if it's of the slasher killer, psycho killer, or of slashers in general, but it does seem to be a thing of, like, things happening on the same day, especially a holiday, where it's like, this is July 4th, this is his day to strike.
Like,
July 4th?
It's July 4th. I don't know.
Why is that your day?
Do you think it's significant that it's on July 4th? I thought it was at first, and I was like, I don't know. It's a summer holiday.
I mean, that was my only thought, is that, like, okay, that makes sense as a night when teens would get up to reckless behavior.
Sure.
They might be at a party, seeing some fireworks, out late to watch the fireworks, drinking.
This is true.
Which is what our teens are doing. That was really the only thing I could think of. Yeah. Plus, it lets us have a parade.
That's true, yeah. And, like, the jump scare of the sound of fireworks, right?
Yes.
I guess
for him, for his purposes, it's good to have, not just as a jump scare, but that sound as cover for everything that he's doing.
True. Right, yeah. They need the disguise, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think the fisherman, Ben Willis, whatever you want to call him, is a great psycho killer. And I also feel like something else I think that psycho killers are, what makes a good psycho killer a great psycho killer, is that if you have some sympathy for them, and I don't feel that, like, super often, so, like, the fact is that, like, these kids kind of did get away with it, right? Like, they were not being held responsible for their actions. Like, so he's, like, taking matters into his own hands. And honestly, like, as a teacher, I have seen student accountability mean less and less over, like, 5 years. And so I'm like, yeah, I get it, man. I was like, yeah, fuck these teens.
Yeah. Murder's a bit extreme, but
a little extreme, but, like, I sympathize, And I just, like, the last thing I want to say is, like, it's kind of a shame that, like, the fisherman doesn't have as much of a legacy as, like, other slasher killers.
Oh, yeah.
Like Freddy or Michael. And maybe it's just because, like, his numbers are low. Like, he's only in, technically, there are 3 last summer movies. The third one, it was, like, kind of like direct to streaming kind of thing. Yeah. Or direct to
VHS.
DVD or something. DVD, probably. Anyway, and I do wonder if some of it has to do with the fact that his name is Ben Willis / the fisherman. Like, it doesn't have the same, like, je ne sais quoi as, like, Leatherface. Oh.
But it's not like Michael Myers has anything.
I know, Michael Myers was I don't know.
But, he was kind of creating the genre, so.
It's true, right?
Yeah. Some,
is laying down the prototypes, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, even Freddy isn't, like, that scary of a name, but, like, Freddy.
Freddy Krueger, though, has a ring.
Krueger is a creepy last name, yeah.
I don't know why.
Anyway,
I mean, I think another thing might be just the fact that while he is a good slasher, he doesn't seem to exactly be existing in a slasher film.
Yeah, he doesn't really exist in a slasher. He's kind of out of place, right? And, and that's also sad. I think it's like, you get your own franchise, buddy.
Yeah,
this would be amazing.
Oh, you'd be out of here. I think part of that is because of the book that this is based on, the novel.
There is no fisherman.
It's not a slasher.
You've told me. Yes.
Yeah, no. The author of it, Lois Duncan. It was published in 1997, so this movie was, like, kind of released at the same time.
Oh, that's crazy to me.
But she was, like, upset. She was like, they turned my book into a slasher, and that's not what it was. Yeah. Like, she was not a fan of that. I mean, there are some things that does make this a slasher. For example, even though the body count is low for a slasher, it's way higher than it would be for, like, than it was in her book, and that it would be for a YA thriller. I feel like also just sort of, like, being a very postmodern slasher thing of having that kind of genre awareness that comes in. That's very Kevin Williamson. Right. Of, like, you know, making references to, like, Angela Lansbury and Jodie Foster and, like, using those as their code names and things.
He also was, I think it's just, like, worth knowing that, like, basically after Scream came out, the studio was like, write another one like that.
Yeah.
You know? And so he was like, okay. And, like, I don't know exactly how the adaptation of this novel came to be.
Yeah.
But,
so, yeah, you can see him doing his sort of normal slasher things.
Yeah.
And, like, mostly with the hook-handed man who's not in the novel, but also some other things. But, yeah. No, the things that really make it a YA thriller, I mean, there's just the fact that Lois Duncan, the author, she kind of actually pioneered the genre, subgenre of, like, thriller and horror for the YA market at this time. Like, she was writing a lot darker stories than her contemporaries at the time, who would have been, like, Judy Blume or, like, Beverly Cleary, you know? Like, they handled serious things, but not in, like, a dark way, like Lois Duncan did. For people who aren't aware of me saying YA, that just means young adult. Yeah. Just in case. Yeah. And yeah, so we're talking about, like...
But young adult, like, to me, a young adult is, like, 21.
Right. But when we talk about YA literature, we're really talking about, like, high school.
High school, yeah.
I think the easiest way to understand it in terms of, like, the mainstream... Like, the reason why YA thrillers have become popular is because of the TV show Pretty Little Liars.
Right.
It really put the genre on the map.
Yeah.
Which also was adapted from a novel series.
Pretty Little Liars?
Yeah, yeah. And I think if you watch this movie after being familiar with Pretty Little Liars, you'll be like, oh, PLL has a lot to thank this movie for in a lot of ways. Like, I can see so much of it. So I think, yeah, I'm probably going to be referencing PLL a lot.
So PLL stands for Pretty Little Liars.
I know you haven't seen it, but in case our listeners have, it's a really good, like, typical example. Quintessential,
yeah.
I might also reference One of Us is Lying, because that's a more recent one. Yeah, it was just on TV last year, 2022. The book was from 2017, so, like, it's a more recent one.
Sure.
But, yeah, we're going to play our archetypes game at the end, I assume.
And anybody who is, you know, any listener who knows that we play archetypes and, like, knows how that game works and listen to us talk about the characters, I think they know exactly where we're going with this.
But I kind of want to say that I feel like they're not going to fit in perfectly, but what they do fit in really well too is actually the YA thriller archetypes.
Oh, okay.
Which are things that I didn't, like, research this, or, like, I'm not working on anybody else's theory. This is just from my experience of this being a genre that I enjoy, because I think it's silly and campy and fun.
Yeah.
So, like, these are just sort of, like, my idea of the archetypes, and we'll definitely see some, like, crossover with our horror slasher archetypes, because I think that it has a, you know, in the way that this movie kind of bridges those two.
Yeah.
I think there's, like, some sort of, like, signs of it, but then it's also different in a lot of ways.
I'm so excited for you to tell me YA thriller archetypes right now. I feel like I should, like, get a snack.
Okay, so the first one is our homecoming queen. She doesn't necessarily have to be a homecoming queen, but that archetype of, like, the popular girl who's, like, maybe outwardly mean, but, like, has a heart of gold normally.
Yeah.
And normally,
or, like, has more going on.
Yes.
Has like more, a shitty sister, maybe?
Yeah, something like that. Like, and also over the course of the story, she'll often, like, somehow distance herself from, like, if the other popular kids are really mean, she'll, like, not be as cruel as they are, and she'll, like, step away from them a lot. And she'll often show that sort of stepping away from her popularity and cruelness by either cutting or dyeing her beautiful blonde hair. That's an often thing that happens.
Really? Yeah, she's got to be blonde. Yeah. I did very much notice that, like, oh, the two blondes are dating and the two brunettes are dating.
Interesting.
I also feel like, honestly, that's just the way I've kind of always differentiated people. The world was always, like, blonde people and, like, brunettes, basically. Sorry, redheads. But I also think that part of that is just, like, the fact that there are no people of color in this movie. So, like, how do we differentiate them?
Hair color.
Between the two white girls and the two white guys. Like, brunette and blonde.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so she's got to be blonde, of course.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this one is interesting because, like I said, often you'll have them, like, cut off their hair, cut it short, because that's, like, such a symbol of their, like, beautiful popularity is their long beauty pageant hair, you know.
Of course, yeah.
And so
it's all about the do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, in Pretty Little Liars, this is kind of like the Hannah character, and she gets, like, shorter, sleeker haircuts. Or, like, Addie in One of Us is Lying. She dyes her hair pink because she's a rebel now.
Oh my god, I'm literally dyeing my hair magenta tomorrow.
Nice, fun.
Yes, I love magenta.
Very excited. Yeah. But then, obviously, in this movie, it's Helen. And she does not choose to cut her hair, but she does get it cut.
It gets cut.
Yeah.
Yes, she is concerned about those things. She does. Yeah, she totally fits that character, which, is interesting because, well...
Are you going to talk about the whore?
Yeah.
Jump, do it.
That's what I think she is.
Right.
She's supposed to be representing, but she's not doing it well.
Well, because I think there is a certain connection. Like, it's easy to see the whore in the Homecoming Queen because it's the beautiful one.
Because it's YA. It's for high school kids. Like, we're not, like, talking about whores.
And I think the other thing, though, is because, like... teen behavior isn't punished in the same way that it is in a slasher.
That's true.
Like, pretty much all of the characters are going to be engaging in, like, teen sexuality in some
Euphoria.
way. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I've never seen it. So
but, like, in this movie where, like, all these characters have sex.
They're all having sex, yeah.
And they're all doing it, though, in, like, the confines of these, like, committed relationships. It's not, like...
heterosexual, too. Yeah.
It's, like, they're not... relishing, punishing these unruly teens. They're trying to show teens how to engage in these behaviors within certain confines and, like, be responsible about it. Where it's, like, the same thing with, like, the drinking. Where it's like, he's going to get super drunk, but we're not going to let him drive.
Right. Yeah.
There's, like...
we know not to do that.
Yeah. There's, an edge that they walk up to, and then they don't go all the way with it. And so, like, shows now, they'll have characters who are, like, talking about consent before they have sex. Or, like, they'll get drunk, but then they'll, like, take care of each other and get each other home.
Right.
Because it's a lot more about educating the teens than it is about, like, relishing in their destruction.
And, like, maybe what a generation or two before would have been urban legends about not engaging in that behavior at all. And now it's, I actually talk about this a lot in my health class, harm reduction.
Yeah.
More harm reduction than absolute abstinence.
Right, yeah.
Which in general, I'm for.
Yeah.
Maybe I should read more YA novels.
They're very campy. They're very silly. So that's our first one, is our Homecoming Queen.
Okay.
Which then gets us to our good student, who is probably the most similar to the Virgin, or kind of like a Virgin Scholar overlap.
Hybrid. Wow.
Because, like, she is also going to engage in sexual behavior. Yeah. And often, like, romance is a central part of her story because she's, like, the smart, nerdy girl who also, in all the teen shows, in all the teen movies, not just the thrillers, the nerdy girl is going to end up with some hot guy. That's just, like, a thing that happens.
Part of the arc is that she takes off her glasses and takes down her ponytail, and she's beautiful, and
Yeah, and I feel like in a comedy or whatever, like a sex comedy, it's more often, like, a popular guy, but in a YA thriller, it's going to be more like the guy from the other side of the tracks,
Yeah.
Which he's another type. I'll get to him.
Okay.
And I would say that she's, like, tends to be a pretty headstrong character. She's the character who's coming up with the plans.
Right.
She's often brunette in stories where it's, like, white people.
Right.
Like, she's very Julie. Julie fits it very well. Mm-hmm. And you can see her in Spencer from Pretty Little Liars, and Bronwyn from One of Us is Lying,
I'm also kind of getting a Hermione vibe.
Yeah, actually. Yeah. That kind of, that's become kind of an archetype as, like, the good girl student.
Right.
Who's, like, really smart.
Yeah.
Because I think she might be kind of like a successor to the Virgin, which doesn't have as much social capital anymore because we don't, like, abstaining from teen sex doesn't hit in the same way.
We're shifting more towards harm reduction rather than absolute
so, like, how do we show that she's a prude or something,
Right.
It's not through that, but it's like that she's spending more time studying than she is going to parties.
Right. And I also feel like for the Virgin, like, the point of the Virgin is, like, innocence.
Yeah.
So, like, where's the innocence?
Yeah, that doesn't play in as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because, like, I could still see... I don't know. Like, I guess Julie kind of does have, like, an innocence.
More so than the others.
More so than the others.
But that's a...
And she, like, kind of gets hit the hardest by it. At least that's what we, like, see her get hit the hardest by it. Okay. Yeah. That sounds like Julie.
Yeah. And I would say from my experience, those first two types tend to be girls.
Yeah.
The other types can be girls. It can be girls and guys. It can be kind of a mix. So our next archetype is the jock.
Of course.
Which is very much just what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
Very similar to our athlete.
Yeah.
Often popular, but doesn't have to be. Usually really singularly focused as well. And I would say usually faces the most, like, physical danger or violence.
Okay.
Like, it just sort of happens. Like, I think about this a lot with...
Because they're instigating it, perchance?
Not always, but because in some way, like, their body is more relevant to what they do.
Fair.
So if somebody's going to target them, they're going to make it so that they can't swim anymore or can't play baseball anymore, which are things that happen to Emily in Pretty Little Liars and Cooper in One of Us is Lying.
Yeah.
Like, they get their sport taken away from them.
Right.
Yeah, and I think there's also something about how, like, in a slasher film, we'll have, like, the final girl who, like, does take down the psycho killer, but not necessarily in like a brawl. Usually
Yeah.
it's more about her resourcefulness.
Yeah.
Or like turning his weapon against him somehow.
Coming up with a plan to like trap him.
Whereas like in YA thriller, we might actually have like a fight.
Oh, like an actual fight.
Yeah. So, I mean, so I think for this movie, it's a little unclear. Like, Barry does have that kind of, I mean, he is a jock.
Right.
He has a scholarship. But there's also an aspect to Ray where he actually does get in a fight with our psycho killer at the end, you know?
Right, yeah, Ray is kind of in on it, yeah. Well, and also because he has the knowledge of sailing, because they're on a boat, and he's been working on a boat for about a year, so, like, we know he has the skill set for that terrain or whatever.
Yeah, and I would say even though he does get in that fight in the end, he's not as physically violent as Barry is. And also Ray just in general fits more this second to last archetype. Last of our victims is the like alternative kid or boy from the wrong side of the tracks. They're technically two different archetypes, but like they tend to kind of have, they can either be the same character or they can fill like a similar role. They're usually the character who's the least popular for whatever reason, either because of socioeconomic class or because they're like a punk weirdo. They're just sort of like, they have less money. They're an outsider in some way.
What also gets me, like what Ray gives me, and like I would like a better term for this because I don't actually believe this exists, but like beta male.
Oh, yeah.
Like what's like, because like Ray kind of is like...
The sidekick, yeah.
I
guess,
like
maybe.
Kind of the beta. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, so, or the sub, whatever. To Barry, at least, you know, the other man. Okay, yeah, so
well,
like...
that's actually interesting, because I feel like the old kid or the boy from the wrong side of the tracks, you know?
Yeah.
They often play a very supportive role to a lot of the other characters, and they're also, like... Because they're like the least popular or whatever, or they don't care about appearances as much because they don't have them. They're the most willing to like lose face in public, which often, in a way, actually kind of makes them the hardest one for the villain to take care of, because the villain often relies on things like blackmail and like taunting people,
humiliation,
you know. Yeah. So I think this is Ray. Because he's like poor. And I think there's also this thing about the wrong side of the tracks kind of guy where he's often the one who's going to romance the nerdy girl. And we have that here. We have that here.
It's going to be them. Yeah. Because you know it's going to be the jock and the homecoming queen. Right. Yeah. And then we need another couple. And so it's got to be.
Yeah. So, and it's an archetype that we have. And one of us is lying. We have Nate, who does romance our smart girl Bronwyn, and he's also the one who's like kind of willing to take the fall and be like, if one of us has to go to prison, I have the least going on in my life.
Wow, okay.
And then in Pretty Little Liars, Caleb and Toby, who are two of the main love interests for the Liars, they're both like lower socioeconomic class. For a while, Caleb is living in Hannah's house because he doesn't have anywhere else to live.
Now, is Pretty Little Liars, like, are the characters meant to be like pretty high socioeconomic status?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
they all there are characters who are less so. Okay.
Yeah,
it's always...
Or else are outsiders for a different reason if it isn't because of their money. Like, Toby is kind of an outsider because there are just, like, rumors about him going around.
And I think about, like, you know, this doesn't fit, like, the theme exactly, but I think about, like, TV shows like 90210 and, like, The OC.
Yeah.
It's just, like, we just love watching rich people.
Yeah.
Do rich people things.
Then, which makes it really funny, because I was thinking about in Pretty Little Liars, like, okay, but then what does that make Aria, because she's one of our liars, and like she is kind of our alternative girl because she's the one who wears like the weirdest fucking outfits. I don't know what she's thinking. And she's also the one who has like the most like quote unquote maturity.
Got it.
She's kind of like the not like other girls kind of girl. So she's like very much this alternative character in that sense, but it's very much a rich sort of alternative girl. She's not an actual like gutter punk sort of scudsy whatever. You know, like she still can be like popular and pretty while still being like, well, I wear darker artsy clothing and get molested by one of my teachers.
Gross.
But it's a romance, so don't worry about
it. I hate this. No. This is why I don't watch this stuff, man.
No, this is an Ezra Fitz hate blog. I'm taking that stance for both of us, even though you haven't watched it.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Gross. Okay.
So those are like my main archetypes.
Wow.
That I think fit this film really well. And we'll talk about our slasher archetypes at the end. But like I think they fit into like
they do
what we see now, which makes me think that this was really, or at least a lot of the work that Lois Duncan does probably really was the precursor to what we see in the genre today. There is one other type of character that I haven't talked about, one more archetype.
Okay.
Which is the Secret Keeper.
Okay.
I'm really proud of that name.
Okay.
It's the character who's like a catalyst.
Oh.
So it might be the person who's murdered, it might be the person who's like doing the murders, or it might be both sometimes, somehow.
Oh. What about, how about
as is the case in this one?
Because I started watching Only Murders in the Building. Is that Selena Gomez's character, at least in the first season, because she is keeping the secret, because she keeps the secret that she knows the dead guy?
I would say it's her friend who died originally.
Oh, the lady.
The girl.
The girl. Okay.
Because, so the deal with
I haven't gotten that far yet.
Because the thing with the YA thriller genre is that they all have secrets. And that's the other thing the Secret Keeper does, is that they know all of their secrets and are going to use it against them.
I see.
So, like, you find out your friend died, but then somebody is writing you blackmail notes about something that only that friend knew. That's like a very classic thing that would happen, and is essentially what happens in I Know What You Did Last Summer. Yeah. Right? Like, that's it. And also, if it is somebody who gets murdered, it's often because of secrets that they kept, that none of their friends knew about. And, like, the mystery usually starts with, like, these mysterious notes that have these secrets in them.
Right.
Alluding to all the, these different secrets that the characters
knowing
have.
A secret that people thought were secret.
Yeah. So it's like blackmail and like taunting and stuff is much more a YA thriller thing than I think a slasher thing. Because there's something about this movie where he takes his time. You talked about that with some of his like...
Yeah, a little too long in my opinion. Yeah.
That he's sort of more focused on that and like the poetic justice of things of like he's going to drive Barry down with his car, like the same car that hit him.
Yeah.
But he's not going to kill him because it's not about that. It's about like making them feel guilty.
Yeah, and like the psychological torture. Yeah, like breaking him down before he finally...
Yeah, and I think part of that is because...
Cat and mouse a little.
In like a YA thriller more so than in a slasher, we don't actually want to kill off our sexy stars.
Right. Yeah. I think that was definitely part of this movie. It's just like, well, we don't want any of them to die.
We have these 4 sexy stars.
Yeah.
So I think that's why he has that first incident with Helen where he's going to cut off her hair and leave the crown there to freak her out but not kill her.
Right.
Or like, it's often a thing of doing things just to make them feel crazy. Like making Julie feel crazy about the crabs.
Well,
or like,
I mean, that was insane.
Yeah. But then also doing it to Helen by killing Barry just out of sight.
Right, yeah. And also like chasing down Barry and not killing him once before. And then killing him out of sight. Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like these are things that like anybody who's watched PLL, like they'll recognize like the liars were always getting stuck with bodies that they did not kill, and then suddenly those bodies disappeared, or like they're getting hit with cars, or cars driving through their house, or there's like a snake in their room, or like they went to the dentist and when they got out there was like a message in one of their teeth. Like these weird things that they do because it's about like taunting them.
Okay.
And like I think part of it is like you want to keep your sexy stars, and the other part of it is that unlike a slasher, we actually care about the characters and their development. And like their relationships with each other.
That's true.
And
much
so like
more so. Yeah.
the focus, they spend more time on like the investigation and like unveiling who this person is than they do running away from him and like almost getting killed by him.
Right. Yeah, because he's kind of not around for a lot of the movie. Yeah.
So there are ways where I think this movie really fits our YA thriller genre while still having some of those slasher aspects that you wouldn't necessarily see in YA thriller too much.
Right.
And I found that interesting.
It is interesting. Well, I guess this is just what we get when Kevin Williamson adapts a YA novel
into a slasher
as a horror screenplay. Like that's just that's just what we get, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, like I was noticing a lot on the internet and just like a lot of the discourse around this movie, like directly comparing it to Scream,
right?
And I see why. Both written by Kevin Williamson, like those two movies came out like a year apart from each other, and like and again, like I mentioned, like Kevin Williamson was asked by the studio to make write another one. Like you made Scream, do it again. Basically,
I can see both the studio and the audience being like, we want another Scream, and going in expecting this to be another Scream,
right?
And then perhaps being disappointed because it's not nearly as clever.
No, it's not. That's the thing. And then people are they still make the connection and like the equating of Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, right? Yeah. And like, they're I think pretty different movies.
I'm trying to think of the similarities other than kind of just sort of the cadence of the dialogue, which is very Kevin Williamson,
right? And
I don't really know what else I could say that's like similar,
right? And
it's not even the same age group, really.
No, not really. Yeah, and it's like it's like a group of young people, like being stalked and murdered, and like that's kind of it. And like, but that's
just a genre.
Yeah, that's the genre. That's what happens in so many movies, right?
Yeah,
and like
that's what they've set out to do with both those films. And like one set out to comment on it while the other set out to just sort of be it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's not nearly as meta for sure. And I think obviously for all those reasons that you just laid out, like it's much more of like a YA thriller than a slasher film, and Scream is much more a slasher, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just wanted to say that, like, I don't get the direct comparison of Scream to I Know What You Did Last Summer. Like,
other than to just sort of shit on I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Right, yeah. It's like, oh, it's not as good ripoff, you know? And it's just like, well, it's not really a ripoff because the same dude wrote them. So, like, that's
a weird thing to say.
That's an important place to start. And it's just like, it's not Scream, but nothing's Scream.
Yeah. And it had a different goal because it was an adaptation, which is a very different type of job. I mean, you could compare any two slashers together, and they're both postmodern, and they both have the same sort of cadence because they're the same writer.
Because they're written by the same person.
But it's like, sometimes writers will write similar things because they're themes that they're interested in.
Yeah.
That doesn't make them, like, rip-offs.
You gotta write what you know, man.
Like, that's such a weird thing to say, a rip-off.
Yeah. So... do you want to get into urban legends now?
Oh, I do. I want to get into my literary corner.
Let's do it.
That was a different melody this time.
Yeah, do you want me to do it?
I don't know.
Okay. I'll do it. Give us one good one. Literary corner.
So as we already mentioned, the original novel did not have that hook-handed man.
Right.
Who is, as you say, such a great psycho killer.
Such a good psycho killer.
Because the original novel...
Too bad he's not in a slasher.
The original novel was not a slasher, so it didn't need that. But I did want to look into just sort of that original mythos, the original urban legend about him, because I just think it's interesting.
Right.
And they tell so many different versions of it.
I definitely also recall... I've heard those stories. Like the version.
I was going to ask you that
versions.
if you remembered hearing one of those.
Yeah, you want me to tell you?
Oh, what version did you know?
Oh, I've heard several. But the main one to me was, a young man and young woman in a car together at like a makeout point or whatever. Like they're listening to the radio and they hear like a radio announcement come on of like an escaped person from the prison or the insane asylum or something nearby.
Sometimes it's insane asylum.
As a hook for a hand, watch out, extremely dangerous, that kind of thing.
I like your radio announcer voice. Thank you. It's very
and my urban legend radio announcer voice.
Yeah. Because we're back at this time, so we're gonna talk like this, eh?
Anyway. And then I think, there's like a dialogue between the young couple and, the girl is usually like, ooh, this is scary. Like, maybe we should go. And the guy's usually like, don't worry, baby. It's fine.
I want to have sex.
And then I've heard, honestly, 2 versions. Mm-hmm.
We get like 3 or 4 versions in this movie.
There's so many versions, yeah. Because that's how urban legends work. I've heard 2 versions. The safer version is that the concerned girlfriend prevails and they leave. And they find the hook on the door of the car.
Yes.
That's like the safer version I've heard. And then like the actual like punishment for sexuality version I've heard is like the guy goes like
to investigate or
they
whatever.
Hear a sound or like
sometimes it's the car broke down.
He hears something out in the wood, whatever, and so he like gets out to investigate and he like never comes back. And then the girl is like, fuck this, and leaves. And like, so I think in both of the main versions I've heard, like the girl gets away.
Often
safe.
There's some where she doesn't.
Some where she doesn't, but the ones I heard, she always did. What about you? Have you heard like a...
I mean, vaguely I knew of it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was something that like was a story we told each other, when we were younger. I think I heard about it later as like talking about urban legends, you know? I guess there was a version that was in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, but I did not read that.
Right. Yeah, I feel like I saw like some version of that story, like being told on like some TV.
Yeah, it gets passed around a lot.
Yeah.
It's very common. I think actually technically the version I heard, which is like a different myth, is the Goat Man story. But I'm bringing it up because it has the same element of a guy and a girl. The version of it I heard was like a guy and a girl in a car.
Right.
They break down, or the guy hears a noise, whatever. He gets out to investigate, and then it's kind of like the version that Helen tells, I think, first, but then Barry also tells about it, where somehow the guy ends up strung up to a tree.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
and then so it's like that kind of version is the one I heard, but the original version is actually the one that Ray is telling,
which is
the one that you were talking about being the more like tame version, where it's like the kids get away in their car, but he goes, so fast that he rips the hook off the hand, of the guy, and the hook's there on the car, and
So, you mean, you said the original version.
The oldest version.
So there is a, pinpointable oldest version of the story.
Kind of.
Okay.
Because, there's another thing that Ray says, which is that, the story's real because urban folktales, they all originate somewhere in some sort of truth.
Right.
And he, kind of has a point about that, but kind of not.
Yeah.
Some have sort of origins that we can trace kind of. Because, if we were talking about deaths on lovers' lanes.
Right, yeah.
Are you familiar with the Texarkana moonlight murders?
Yes. Town Who Dreaded Sundown.
Yes. I was not familiar.
That's kind of all I got.
Yeah. It was 40s or 50s, something like that. But yeah, it was just some, young co-eds on Lover's Lane getting attacked in their cars.
Yeah.
Killed. And that did happen before the myth started originating. Our earliest, known examples of it. So, it could have technically been an inspiration. Right. But then, other people talk about inspirations, there are things that actually happen later, like the Zodiac Killer, or the Son of Sam. Those things happen later. And, also, including Texarkana, none of those involved, the hook, which is the most iconic part of the urban.
The point of that story,
yeah. So it's
I also just think about, what urban legends do. It at some point they're based in some truth, but all stories, over time they get embellished, and a hand becomes a hook for a hand, and a 5'6" person becomes 6'6".
Well, yeah, and I think that in the sense of these arising out of truth, what they're really arising out of is social anxieties,
absolutely,
rather than facts,
always,
and social anxieties are a truth in a way. It's true that you're feeling anxious about that. So it's maybe taking some of these kind of true elements and getting scared about them, getting scared about teens in cars alone, things like that, giving voice to these anxieties, often sort of reinforcing social control, by keeping women and children confined indoors, or discouraging teen sex, A lot of this is actually coming from the American Hysteria podcast. Chelsea Weber-Smith does.
Every time they're on You're Wrong About, I always enjoy those episodes.
I would recommend, if you just want short little tidbits and want to get deeper on the hook-handed man stuff.
Yeah.
They have an earlier episode called Teen Sex, is one of their early ones, where they talk about it. And then they have a discussion with some other people in the next episode, which is just about murdered on Lover's Lane sort of stories.
Interesting.
And they brought up this interesting point of those murders on Lover's Lane happened after the myth was already going round. And, there perhaps being a sexual component to those cases of, these killers sort of enacting rage against these teens who are able to have this, normative sex life and young love that, they couldn't or whatever.
Right, yeah.
That this
maybe because they're disabled.
Yeah.
Yes.
That this didn't, originate the myth, but it did sort of feed into the myth and, allow it to expand and grow and, add to its meaning in a different way. But should we talk about the hook as a phallic symbol that gets ultimately castrated?
Sure. I feel in the way that just weapons in general can be phallic representation, symbolism. This is kind of a weird one. It's not a machete, it's not a chainsaw, it's not a gun. It's a rounded fish hook.
Yeah.
So I guess
it's not the most phallic shaped.
Not the most phallic shaped.
But anything that can penetrate.
Right. Or, anything like that.
Yeah.
So.
But this really goes back to the idea of this being an anxiety about teens having sex. And that's why we need to castrate this phallic symbol.
Yes.
And it actually comes from this folklorist, Alan Dundas.
Okay.
He had this sort of Freudian interpretation where he's...
Love a Freudian interpretation. Lay it on me.
That, the hook-handed man wants to stop these teens from having sex out of this jealousy over his own missing appendage. Because he does not have his appendage anymore, but it's his hand, but it's also his penis.
It's also his penis. It's always his penis.
Yeah. It is interesting because this is a myth that is arriving out of anxieties about teen sex.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know this. The concept of the teenager is relatively new.
Very new. Yeah.
It's came after World War I.
I thought it was even later than that.
Yeah. Well, no, because that's when we first started to have flappers. Of young women, and the first time that youngsters had free time to have fun
and also disposable income.
Yeah. So that's when we first started having anxiety, but also we had a similar uptick in anxiety about teens after World War II, because we had a similar thing where we had an economic uptick.
Yeah.
And we had,
and
these teens who weren't working and weren't going to war. So what were they doing with their time?
We got stricter on our child labor laws.
Yeah. And there's also like kind of a distrust between the teens and the adults.
Oh, 1,000%.
Because there was just a huge war.
Yeah.
That the teens feel like the adults are responsible for.
Right,
and like, so there's like some tensions there going into the 1950s, which is also when teens were starting to buy their own cars and gaining freedom from the home.
Yeah.
It's like the first time they were allowed to leave the home on their own, really.
And just go wherever.
And parents had no idea.
Yeah, like maybe they're going to see a movie. Maybe they're going to the library to study. Maybe they're going to go make out a Makeout Point. Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah.
So the hard thing with like urban legends is that it's a very oral tradition, which makes it even harder to pinpoint where they came from, their exact origin.
Yeah, that's why I asked you and was like, nobody's writing this down.
But
yeah.
We do have a Dear Abby letter from 1960.
Oh, and it's my understanding that like those like columns, like that's also somewhere where we see these like, you know, social anxieties and urban legends like being perpetrated in print.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, so tell me about that.
Well, this is one. And it starts off with the writer being like, I don't know if it's true or not, but it doesn't matter because it served its purpose to me. And then she goes on to write about essentially the version that we talked about. That's the one that Ray tells in the movie where they get away and there's the hook hand on the car. And she ends the letter by being like, I don't think I'll ever park to make out as long as I live. I hope this does the same for other kids. And so it's like very clearly meant as like this cautionary tale about like, don't go out there necking. Don't go parking anywhere.
Don't go parking. Yep.
Because it's the story where like they're going to have sex and the hook-handed man kind of saves them from having sex, doing that sinful act. Like, it's because she's scared that they don't. And so it's like kind of our precursor to like the don't have sex rule of the slasher movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it really is, which is why it kind of comes up in a lot of things, why this urban legend continues to be kind of popular in a way. To the point where, have you ever seen the meme where it gets like boiled down to like door hook car, hand hook car, or whatever it is, where it's just like the series of words. I didn't do it in the right order, but it's like a meme. So then after that is when we start to get the versions that like Barry and Helen are talking about, where there's either the dripping on the hood of the car or the scraping from the feet because you look outside and the boyfriend's been hung up from a tree. But you're right. I think most of the time the girlfriend gets away, except for there is one version that I hadn't heard before where her boyfriend's not coming back and she's like, where the fuck's my boyfriend? And she's staying in the car. But she looks over and she sees the hook-handed man with the decapitated head of her boyfriend and also the keys to the car. And that's where the story ends.
And that's where the story ends. Yes, because you know your imagination can do so much more heavy lifting than anybody's explanation of what happens next.
I just want to end with this last point that actually was made in the podcast episodes I was talking
American
about.
Hysteria.
That this is an interesting story because it's a story where the girl is right. And they're like, you'll get saved if you listen to women. Which is like, but then it's coming from this place of like, women are socialized to think about safety more. Because the consequences of like sex or going out at night, like those are placed on women. And I just thought that was interesting in terms of this movie, right? Where it's like Julie often is the one who has like the right ideas about things. And then her boyfriend tells her that sounds crazy. Or like Helen is like, oh, they're killing him right now. And they're like, she's hysterical. That is like kind of the same moral. And it's like the men kind of suffer consequences if they don't listen because like the boyfriend getting decapitated in the story instead of going home is like the same thing as the cop getting killed because he didn't fucking listen to Helen. He didn't fucking believe. But it's really coming from this place of men not having to worry about these things in the same way that women do.
And not listening to women is to their detriment.
But that only exists because we live in this like misogynistic society where women are placed in these sort of dangers more often. And then it becomes like the job of these teen girls to warn people about these dangers.
That cop did suck, though.
That cop fucking sucked.
I know.
Which is another aspect of both a slasher and a YA thriller.
Inept.
Cops suck.
Inept law enforcement. Yeah, totally.
But yes, that was my literary corner.
I love it. So, urban legends are absolutely one of, like, the main driving themes in this movie, right?
Yes.
But there's a couple other themes. I think, like, you know, we've mentioned a lot already that, like, this movie, or, like, the incident takes place in the summer between the end of high school and the beginning of college. Or life after high school. Right? Whatever that looks like.
Weird transition period.
It is a weird transition period, right? So there's definitely a lot of, like, coming of age and growing up stuff Like, our story is about these young people, like, on the precipice of adulthood, you know?
And not really sure how to face it.
They're bad at it, yeah. And, like, a loss of innocence.
Yeah.
Very quickly, and in this case, violently, you know?
Right.
After what... I mean, you know, Barry is, like, being super distracting and a total dick. But, like, it was an accident.
Yeah.
You know, what happened when they hit him with the car.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
That part was an accident, you know? And so, like, I feel like that's when they kind of get, like, pushed out of childhood and, like, into adulthood just, like, by fate. And then I think we kind of see each character try to, like, in their own way, cling on to childhood to, like, not let go of it because, like, they don't know how to adult.
Right.
Especially, like, in such, like, a severe instance, you know? Like, they cling on to childhood just by, like, refusing to take responsibility for what happened.
Yeah.
And their rationale is, like, really childish. Like, they're afraid of getting in trouble.
Yeah.
And, like, not taking into account that, like, somebody might be dead. They think he's dead.
Right.
And they're still just like, oh, I can't get into trouble. And, like, not even, like, go to prison forever. Like, my dad will be mad at me or something like that.
Teen
you know?
response. And then even after that, not really taking responsibility for their lives that come after, where a lot of them just try to stay in their childhood homes, in their childhood towns.
Yeah.
They don't do their schoolwork or, like, you know, they're just like, stop sort of participating in their life, stop taking responsibility for their own lives.
Yeah, and, like, stop growing and changing. Like, you're just stuck there, And, you know, I feel like this is sort of an allegory for, like, coming of age and growing up, you know? It's like, it's hard. It can be, like, uncomfortable, you know?
Yeah, like what you were saying about her first year at college. I mean, sometimes kids just get fucked up by the first year of college.
Yeah.
They don't need, like, some sort of traumatic event
like,
behind it.
The transition from high school to college is enough, right?
Yeah.
You know?
I cried every day in my closet. Come on.
In your closet?
Yeah. I had a really big closet.
That Mills had nice closets.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I like to just sort of hole up in it.
Yeah. Yeah, especially, like, if college is attached to moving away from home for the first time. From leaving behind, like, maybe you didn't love it, but at least you knew.
Right.
It was comfortable. You were familiar with, like, your high school life.
Yeah.
Right?
And also this idea of being sort of like a big fish in a small pond.
Yeah.
And then now you're the small fish.
Yeah, and, like, this is who I was in high school. I'm not in high school anymore. I'm not a high schooler.
People don't fucking care.
So who am I?
Yeah.
Like, who am I now, right?
Yeah.
Like, who do I hope to be? The characters, what they experience the summer between leaving high school and then, like, you know, for a couple of them going to college, for a couple of them
starting careers. Or at least working.
It's like, that's an intense summer, you know?
Yeah.
Like, that was the first summer I worked at a Girl Scout camp. Huge mistake. I should not have done that. I had too much going on. Yeah, and then we even get that scene before it all goes down, like when Helen's won her crown, I think, and, like, they're toasting and, like, you know, Barry's gonna get wasted. He says they toast to a final summer of immature adolescent decadence.
Yes,
and
they know exactly what they're doing,
and they never get that.
Yeah,
they don't get that because, like, a few hours later, then this accident happens and they're changed
there goes
forever.
The decadence.
You know? And it makes me think of, like, something really bittersweet about childhood and, like, adolescence and coming of age and becoming an adult is, like, you never know when the last time you do something is.
Yeah,
and then you think about, oh yeah, I remember, like, you know. I used to do that all the time, and then, like, yeah, and then you stopped and you don't do it anymore.
And,
you know,
why?
it's like because
you just grew out of it.
You're older
or
now.
Circumstances got in the way, or whatever it was.
I think we have already talked about the relationship between Julie and Ray, right? Mm-hmm. But, like, Helen and Barry, especially at the very beginning of this film, also have, like, a really interesting relationship because Helen is talking with Barry at the beginning about, like, literally planning the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
She's like, I got it down. Like, I'm going to be finishing up this season on Guiding Light. You're going to be the starting quarterback. She says the wrong team, but it doesn't matter, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're going to impregnate me with one of 3 children before you go off to rehab. And I was like, damn, you've got
I know.
life
She's even
plans.
scheduling in his rehab.
Yeah. Because she knows that he's got a drinking problem. Or will probably develop one as he gets older. But, of course, like, none of that, like, their life together is not going to happen, right? And it's not just because they both end up dying.
Right.
It's just because, like, that's not going to happen. Like,
because you're fucking in high school. Yeah, you're graduating. You don't even fucking know.
Like, relationships change so rapidly. Like,
I mean, because not every relationship is meant to last forever, and that doesn't mean it's a bad relationship.
That's true. Yeah, like, and especially at this point in a person's life, like, relationships and, like, the nature of them are changing really rapidly, and, like, people go their separate ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, you become a different person, and like that other person becomes a different person,
and you learn from these things, and yeah. And I do think it's interesting that they basically made these decisions to like not call the cops or whatever because they were afraid of it ruining these lives that they had set out for themselves.
Right.
But like when we see them, like we've already talked about, Julie's doing horribly. Helen's didn't make it in New York. You know, like Barry did go to school, but he also doesn't seem like he's doing great.
It sounds like, Barry? Yeah, like he's in school and like he's on the football team.
But like what else is going on with him? He still seems like the same. He just still seems kind of stunted.
Yeah, he seemed, especially like, oh my gosh, like think about the person you were at the end of your senior year of high school and at the end of your first year of college.
Normally that's a big growth period.
It's a big growth period.
And not for him.
He seems stunted. I wonder if he is a lot like Julie, where like he's got these things and he's kind of just going through the motions.
Yeah. And then we have Ray, who had these plans, maybe, but now he's like a fisherman.
And
he's
he
just
was like,
in
whatever,
jail.
I'll just be a fisherman. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like their lives did get ruined, but not because they called the cops. And like, would their lives have been ruined in the same way if they had taken responsibility for what they did, you know?
Right.
And if their lives were going to be ruined anyway.
I think, let's talk about, I know what you did last summer, Law.
Yeah.
Like, the first initial part happened.
Yes.
We know Ray was driving the car, but it wasn't his car, and it was Barry's car, and Barry wasn't driving because he's drunk.
Yes.
And yeah, he's underage drinking, but like he's not driving, and yes, he was a distraction. So like it was an accident, you know. Like,
I do not see them facing any criminal charges.
No, especially like since they're all white.
And as they point out, except for Ray, they all can afford nice lawyers.
They can afford nice lawyers.
That does make it the hardest for Ray because he was the one who was driving.
He was driving, but like...
But the only reason that would be a problem would have been if he was drunk. But Barry was the only one. Well, I think Helen might have been a little drunk too. But like...
But Ray was
as far as we know, that's why
driving.
He's the one who's driving. Is because he's like their DD, you know? And like, it was dark. It was late at night. This guy was crossing the road without, like, it was so clearly an accident.
An accident, yeah.
If they had called the cops, I think and like, I feel like maybe they could have been, like, sued for damages.
Sure.
That's often what happens.
I'm wondering if maybe Ray might get something like a year of probation.
Yeah.
Or, like, a shit ton of community service. But, like... Barry's gonna be fine.
I don't see jail time happening.
Yeah, and like maybe also for like the girls.
Oh,
but like honestly,
I don't see anything happening.
No, because
to the girls.
if it
the
stops
girls are fine.
there, they were just witnesses. They didn't do anything.
Yeah.
But then it escalates and they keep going, and then the girls do have some culpability.
Yeah, which then makes sense because the girls are the ones who are like, nah, we should call the cops.
But yeah, they are. And like, but the thing is like they are not thinking with adult brains.
No,
they are thinking with kid brains. They are thinking with kid brains.
Yes. So I just find that really interesting. But I found really interesting about their guilt is actually their moments of like denial about it. Like when Barry is getting attacked, it's like kind of one of his rare sort of honest moments where he's like, I'm sorry, we didn't mean it.
Yeah.
But it's also just to save his own skin.
Yeah,
so it's like, does he actually feel guilt for this? Whereas, like, we know that Julie feels guilt. She's the only person who is very upfront about how she feels that they did something
really
wrong.
Guilty about it, yeah.
And she, like, kept track of the body, you know. And we also kind of learn later that Ray felt guilty and had that relationship with David's sister. And then Helen, once again, most interesting character. She keeps insisting it's an accident. And there's, like, this kind of cognitive dissonance that she has about it.
Right.
Where she even has this line where she's like, well, maybe he wanted to die. Maybe he was waiting for somebody to hit him.
Because he was just, like,
I mean, it's not a horrible theory.
Like, a freeway, like a highway road.
Yeah.
Or a country road, at least.
Yeah, and even us as viewers, since at that point we still think it's David, and we did get that early shot of some guy.
Right, yeah.
Looking like he's about to kill himself and jump off the... something. He looks really sad.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's like, maybe. But Julie's just like, okay, girl, whatever helps you sleep at night.
Yeah.
Like,
it's almost like Helen is, like, forgot about the second half of the incident.
But then I think the moment where her guilt shines through is actually when she's telling the cop that, like, Barry's just been murdered.
Right, yeah.
And she's like, there's been a murder. You're going to rot in hell if you ignore it.
Right. And it's just like, well, that's what you did, Helen.
Yes. So I'm like, are you
think that,
talking
Helen?
to yourself?
Yeah.
Is that why you couldn't make it in New York? Because you didn't think you deserved it? Like, what is... Yeah. So her guilt is really interesting to me. And it's also just really funny in terms of their guilt. Like, okay, Helen has to go down, I guess, because she kept saying it was an accident. Barry really was the one who did it the most. I guess he had to go down.
He has the most to be guilty about. Yeah,
Ray and Julie showing the most remorse and like reaching out to the family and stuff. So like they get to live.
Yes,
but it's like they were still in the wrong. Like they still fucked up a lot.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Like throughout that entire scene of when they hit the guy, to dumping him in the ocean and leaving, it's just like they really do a good job of balancing like it's not all Barry. Like Helen did a little bit too. Yeah. You know, and even Julie's a little bit complicit in, you know, what happens.
Honestly, the most wild part to me is that like, okay, they take care of the slasher killer. It's a year later. She's fine. She's totally fine now.
Julie?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's great. She's on the dean's list.
She's not traumatized at all.
No. She's on the dean's list.
No more guilt. It's like you still did the thing that you were feeling guilty about.
She's back with her boyfriend, her high school boyfriend, and she's like, doing
you still
great.
did, just because that guy didn't actually end up dying, you left him for dead, which is the thing you felt bad about.
Right. You did that. That's a thing you did.
Yeah. And sure, he came back to kill you, so I can understand not really feeling that remorse for him anymore.
Right.
But also, this guy just tried to kill you and did kill your friend, so maybe I'm surprised that she is on the dean's list, is all I'm saying.
And also, like, again, like, she has to live knowing that, like, she is, or at least was, the kind of person who would do that.
Yes.
You know? And like maybe she rationalized it like, well, I was in like I had social influence, you know, like
she was the one who like the whole time I was like, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do this, but she still let it happen. She didn't call, she didn't tell anybody.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think guilt is a really interesting thing, and like it's actually something that they talk about. Lois Duncan, the writer, really doing is that a big theme for her writing is sort of like taking responsibility, how you take responsibility, when you take responsibility.
I like that.
And I think that definitely shows up. I'm assuming that's
also
from the novel.
That's the kind of thing I want my high school students to be consuming. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do absolutely see like the guilt and the blame.
Yeah.
But I do have a lot of thoughts on the theme of like socioeconomic status. Yeah. Which we've talked quite a bit already.
Yeah, mostly because it's mostly to do with Ray. My favorite relevant line is Max saying to Ray, "You almost got that rich boy to act down."
Oh, yeah.
Like, okay.
Oh, God, Max.
What a weird bully thing to say.
I know, it's so
You're such a weird bully.
He's so weird. Ray absolutely does a lot of, like, the representing of the socioeconomic stuff. But also, I think just in general, like, the fish. Like, there's a significance to fish in this movie. Obviously, like, the main one is that it represents, like, economic prosperity, right?
Right.
Because it's, like, obviously how this town probably supports its economy.
Yeah, it's a major
fishing town.
Part of their parade.
It's a fishing town,
giant fishes.
Yeah. Fishing is obviously an occupation a lot of people have in this town. But also, let's not forget that our bad guy, our psycho killer, is a fisherman.
Yeah.
So, like, he's also the figure that, like, enacts violence on these people who have, like, a higher socioeconomic status.
Though it's also, interestingly, on that subject, what Ray and also Max, actually, become after high school.
Right, yeah.
They both have to become those fishermen, because Ray, at least, was not a part of that higher socioeconomic class. He couldn't maintain it after high school.
And, like, that's probably where a lot of the people in this town go work. Like, they leave high school, maybe have, like, a little summer, and then they just probably show up to wherever fishermen
their dad works.
Yeah, like the dock, whatever, and be like, cool, get me on a boat. And they're like, fuck yeah, we always need more hands, get on this boat, right?
Yeah.
So we do see the fisherman, like, as the figure enacting violence on, like, the people who have a higher socioeconomic status, but also people who are within the industry, you know, and, like, and Ray and Max are both, like, big red herrings in this movie.
Yeah.
You know, like, maybe because they're fishermen, maybe it's because Ray is, like, gone for half of it.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, and then there's also literally why Barry accuses Ray, which is because he was always jealous of us or whatever.
Right.
It's this clear tension of, like, because you are more poor than we are, you have a reason to want us dead. Yeah. Which is like,
okay, whatever.
I mean,
so
kinda.
We talk. So,
but
like,
rich people kill more poor people. Is all I'm gonna say on that.
Exactly, and we'll talk about that when we get to the Purge.
Yes.
Oh, Purge. Also, you know, so there's fish everywhere, right? And, like, fishermen, like, that symbol is everywhere. But Missy, we see, like, the second time we go to Missy's house, we see her chopping up fish.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like, so she's got the knife, so she's looking a little menacing, you know? And it's so weird that, like, she's cutting up fish when like Julie goes back to investigate. And so it's like interesting, like all I got is like, why is this happening? I presume she's cutting them up to eat them.
Yeah. I know, she's preparing
She's preparing food.
I don't know if she caught it herself or what.
Or she bought it, went into town and bought it because there's fish fucking everywhere.
Yeah, and they got a nice fresh fish.
So it's just interesting that, like, Missy is the character we see, like, preparing fish and, like, actually working with the fish like that,
But, yeah, it also, I feel like, though, plays into that sort of, like, domestic sphere of, like, the men do the fishing,
catch
the women,
the fish, and then the
women do the preparing, the cooking.
Exactly what my grandparents did. My grandma would fish too, but like my grandpa would catch the fish, and it was like my grandma's job to like take off the scales and gut it, and I honestly like I do eat fish, but like I have no interest in gutting and cleaning a fish. Like that sounds awful.
Does anybody enjoy that?
I don't know. It's just like maybe you have to find joy in it. Like for so many people, it's their livelihood.
Right?
They're just like get into it, man. Maybe over time it doesn't bother you as much.
That's true. I'm sure it wouldn't bother you if you were used to it.
I think what there is also here is like what we're kind of teasing at is like there's this underlying mistrust of the working class.
Absolutely.
Just in general. Like they
are the villain.
Hey, Ray ends up being a red herring, right? Because he's gone for most of the second half. Yeah. And like he has lost those connections to his higher class friends, right? He becomes a fisherman just like his dad was, And yeah, after Barry gets attacked the first time, he does accuse Ray because he said he was attacked by a man in a slicker, right? And he's like, Ray, don't you own a slicker? Barry, half the town owns a slicker.
That's what this town does.
Yes. So it's just like, and then we even see them throughout the parade scene.
Yes.
Like there are people in slickers and no one is worried about it.
Yeah,
so,
because it's what people wear.
So yeah, this movie just has like a really weird, like, don't trust the working class.
Yeah.
And I just think it's really interesting, and maybe that like ties back more into the YA thriller of it all.
Yeah, maybe
like where
there is some class anxiety there. Yeah,
we like to see, or like we like to see the people like on our screens or like
need
characters
to be the
in our
rich,
books.
beautiful people.
We want like their life to seem like exciting and like they do things that like normal whatever and
they
like,
need to have enough access to like transportation so that they can go investigate clues and like and like nice outfits because we want to watch them in nice outfits and like and I feel like where lower socioeconomic class people show up in these things is only as like a token love interest.
Right, yeah.
Who might be one of the characters, but, like, stands out for that outsider status.
Yeah, and, like, the outsider status, like, is specifically class.
Yeah.
So many times, because, like, they're usually the same race. Although I think, like, we're maybe doing a better job of
We
that.
are.
I don't know. I'm actually not involved in the YA community, so you say yes, I believe you.
Yeah. I mean, though, actually, The Black Queen is a book that came out, I think, last year. Okay. Which is about, like, this small town, mostly white, and it's the first black girl to win homecoming queen, but then there's a murder.
Of course.
So, like, yeah, there's definitely, like, some concerted efforts to add more, like, diversity, and definitely, like, Pretty Little Liars had their one token Pretty Little Liar who was a girl of color. The reboot, I was going to say had more people of color, but I'm not sure if that's actually.
Not sure about that. Don't quote her. Okay.
But One of Us is Lying definitely has, like, 2 of the main 4 are people of color.
That's good.
So, like, and we're also getting, like, more queerness.
Exactly, yeah.
Like,
so
YA is a great genre for queerness.
Right, but exactly, right. So, like, that's nice that we're, like, kind of moving more towards that. But, like, if we're looking at this movie in its time of 1997, like, what is going to set the outsider apart?
We're not going to have a person of color.
It's not going to be their race. It's not going to be their sexuality.
No, we're not going to talk about that.
It's going to be, like, their socioeconomic class, or ability, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are still things that show up in the genre.
Exactly. So, Katie, I did a little bit of extra homework for this, and I watched the sequel. Okay. I've never seen it before. It's called I Still Know What You Did Last Summer.
Bad name.
Bad name. And then the third one in the trilogy is called I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer.
Also bad.
It's too long. Which I know is it's from the novel title, but it's too long.
And it's also like, it doesn't mean anything. Like, yeah, if you knew what I did last summer, then you're still going to know it.
Yeah.
And that's how knowing things works.
Also,
you didn't get amnesia.
Last summer will become
a different summer.
A different summer. Yeah, I don't know. Immediately we get like the diversity. We get Brandy and Mekhi Phifer's character.
Nice.
They do great. And you know, Brandy survives, actually.
Good job, girl.
Mekhi Phifer does die. But unfortunately, like, they undo all of that with... Did you know Jack Black is in this movie?
Whoa!
He has, like, a little supporting role. Jack Black's character, because it takes place in the Bahamas.
Oh.
So Jack Black is, like, this white dude with, like, dreadlocks and, like, putting on, like, a Rasta thing.
No.
So there's that, which is like, oh, I don't love this for Jack Black. And I think, actually, Jack Black has, like, been pretty vocal about, like, yeah, that was a mistake. Like, that character was, like...
bad.
Not a good idea. Also, one other thing that I really liked is Mekhi Phifer's character does die, and the very, very last thing he says before he gets hooked is "psycho killer."
Oh, nice.
I like that. I was like, nice touch. Yes, well done. Okay, are you ready to play archetypes?
Yeah.
I think we already have played archetypes.
Yeah, I feel like, we can kind of rapid fire this.
However, I do want to say, like, I really appreciate you, like, bringing the YA archetypes to me and, like, the, like, kind of bookworm person, because, like, that's what I was thinking for Julie. I was like, she's, like, kind of this weird scholar virgin hybrid.
Right. That's what
and
I
so
ended
now
up
I
with.
have a word for it.
Yeah, especially since we have our 4 main teens, so we don't really have our 5. Like, I was thinking about who could be our 5, and it was like,
honestly,
is Max one of them?
No,
like,
he's not.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, like, to me, if Max were one of them, I feel like he would be the virgin.
Yeah.
Because, like, we have established that these other two couples have already had sex. So, like, he would be the virgin, but he dies first.
Yeah.
And, like, that's not what a virgin does.
So it doesn't. Plus, he's just not really a part of it.
No. So, like, to me... okay, so this is the conclusion I came to. Is because you're right, we don't have 5, we have 4.
Yeah.
And, like, I tried to think about a 5th, and I was like, no, I feel like, you know, this slasher isn't really a slasher. Turns out it's a YA thriller, right? It's not really a slasher. Like, there is no virgin. Like, there isn't one. So I just took virgin off the board. I was like, that's not an option.
Yeah.
So then that gave me Julie as the scholar, because, like, she's obviously, like, they make so many references to her
that's, like,
being
her
intelligent.
only character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she is, like, she does do virginal things. Like, if Virgin was still, like, on the board.
She still has the most final girl vibes out of our choices.
She absolutely has, like, the most final girl vibes. And honestly, at least for a big chunks of the movie, she is also dressed quite modestly.
Yeah.
Especially where Sarah Michelle Gellar's character is, like, in a crop top and, like, short shorts, you know?
Plus, she has the darker hair.
She does have the darker hair, exactly. I'm telling you.
Oh my god, she also has this part that made me think of Scream.
Oh yeah?
Where she's talking, she's talking to Ray about something, and then she, like, screams and runs off in the very Sydney way from the first Scream.
Yeah, and also, Julie, Jennifer Love Hewitt does get some good screams in.
Yeah.
She does. She gets some good screams. So yeah, Julie's the scholar.
Yeah,
obviously.
she's our scholar.
And, like, she's the final girl, but like we mentioned earlier, like you said, which I really like, is, like, her and Ray kind of split it. Final girl responsibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm curious, did you go for him as our athlete?
No. Barry's the athlete.
You kept with Barry as the athlete?
Oh, absolutely.
See, I thought about that, but Ray just didn't feel like a fool, whereas Barry has those fool archetypes of being the one who, like, overindulges.
Sure.
You know, with the drinking and stuff.
Sure. But I just feel like you're right, but, like, I just feel like Barry is just such an athlete.
He is such an athlete in so many ways.
Like, he does, like, he is the first to act.
Yeah.
You know, when, like, he does use his body in those ways.
And I guess the ways that I'm seeing Ray as an athlete are actually the ways in which he is splitting that final girl duty.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know, because he gets that final fight with the...
He does get the final fight. And also, Barry is literally an athlete.
Right.
I feel like. So it's like, okay, you know, that's all I need, you know? So yeah, to me, I guess Ray was the fool, but he's the one who, like, doesn't fit as well.
No, I also considered Helen as our fool because she has the vibes of being the sort of, like, if you take a different side of fool, of being the sort of, like, vapid socialite kind.
Right, yeah, yeah.
And also the one who says things that are kind of on the nose, but doesn't even realize she's being on the nose when she's, like, Like the line I was talking about where she's like, somebody was murdered and if you ignore it, you rot in hell.
Yeah.
Like where she says things that are true without even realizing she says things that are true, or like,
that
we
is
don't
very
have that much
foolish.
power.
Yeah.
So I was like, she could be, but she also has the traditional archetypes of a whore.
She really does. She's blonde, first of all.
Yeah.
And she also
Beauty
is,
queen.
at least on the surface, like very concerned with her appearance.
Yeah.
Especially her hair.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I think like she kind of has to be, you know?
Yeah.
Well, especially since like Ray's not the whore. So that does just kind of leave Ray to be the fool.
Yeah.
Which is,
but then I was like, is he?
I mean, I don't know. He's just kind of like, I feel like Ray gives me like, oh, precious. You know?
Yeah,
It's like, oh, precious boy, you know? And he does kind of end up going back into that like more working class, like physical job.
Yeah.
You know?
Which to me is more athlete, but
That's true. Yeah, he does use his body a lot for work.
I don't know.
That's true.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think what it comes down to is that they're even harder than some of our other attempts to do the archetypes,
Right.
because this isn't a fucking slasher. It just isn't.
And there's not even 5 of them.
Yeah, and yet it fits so well with the sort of traditional YA thriller archetype. So there it is.
Yeah, which is like, just drive that home one more time.
Yeah. So this has been Deep Thoughts, Shallow Plots.
We have an Instagram.
Yeah, follow us on Instagram.
At Deep Thought Shallow Plots, all one word, lowercase.
Thanks as always to Sound Guy Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Join us next time. We're going to do
our first non-English movie. Yeah, we're going to do Ju-on, the original Grudge in Japanese. Very excited.
I'm probably going to be scared.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, so don't forget to join us then.
And don't forget that we'll be switching to once a month.
And until next time, when you leave a man for dead, make sure he's really dead.